heard his name, but never.
We'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Woodland Park Planning Commission for the 27th of September. Can we have an order and a roll call?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, beginning with Jeff Watson. Lee Brown.
Here.
Ellen Carrick.
Here.
Vicki Good.
Here.
Ken Hartsfield.
Here.
Jerry Penland. Peter Scanlon.
Here.
John DeVoe.
Here.
And for the record, Charles Schrader is away today.
Would you please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance?
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes for September 13th. Do we have any corrections, amendments, anything? If not, look for a motion to approve.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Motion approved. Okay. We'll read into the record the first item on the agenda. Before I do that, any disclosure of ex parte communication or have any conflicts with anything with this with any of these items, please speak now. Okay. None heard.
Mr. Chair, I do have a past business relationship with the applicants on both projects tonight. I don't feel that it will influence my opinion, and I have no current business dealings.
Anybody have an objection to him staying on? Okay. We shall proceed. Number 4 on here, the first thing is public hearings of FHDP 18-001, Sundance at Shining Mountain Flood Hazard Development Permit. Request to construct a residential duplex as requested by Ray 2 LLC, property owner, and Mark 2 LLC, applicant, on lots 4 and 5, Sundance at Shining Mountain. Future filing 3, located at 1306 and 1308 Longs Point, Woodland Park, Colorado. Who's going to present?
Good evening. I will start with the presentation. Try that. Is that better? There we go. Thank you. This is a flood hazard development permit for the first hearing this evening. Our Title 20 in the Municipal Code requires that the Planning Commission hold a hearing whenever there is any construction proposed within a special hazard flood area, which is the fancy word for floodplain. This property is located just north of the core of Woodland Park, up Highway 67 and Research Drive, and is located on Longs Point. This is where the confluence of Loy Gulch actually begins up by the water treatment plant and traverses through Valley View Drive and then connects into Trout Creek. There's also another floodplain that's associated with this drainage system, and that is the Lovell Gulch area as well, and its confluence is just above this site. So we'll be talking primarily about Loy Gulch this evening. I wanted to start with a little terminology because this gets a little technical as far as floodplains are concerned. First of all, it's important to know that the special flood hazard area is the area which floods for a 100-year storm or a 1% chance of an inundation of rain during a certain period of time. And so that special flood hazard area typically has two parts to it. It has a floodway, which primarily carries most of the flow, and then there is what's called a flood fringe. The flood fringe is where it overflows during these heavy storm events. And if you were to build in the floodway, then you must reorganize or remap that floodway. This floodway on Loy Gulch has been remapped several years ago due to the new culvert and the new alignment that was put in. The proposed construction this evening does not encroach on the floodway, but it does encroach on the flood fringe. And it is fine to build within the flood fringe as long as that construction for residential construction is at least 12 inches above what's called the base flood elevation. So the base flood elevation is what is key in evaluating those heavy storm events for the 100-year storm. So that's the terminology, and this is what a flood insurance rate map looks like. And I know it's a little bit hard to see, and we'll be zooming in on this, but I wanted to point out first the streets. This is Woodland Valley Ranch Drive, and the other yellow line is Longs Point. This is where the duplexes are being built adjacent to the golf course. And the site tonight are two lots or a duplex side by side that is just north of the new culvert that was put in to traverse Longs Point traverses this culvert. I've circled the base flood elevation at this point in red, which is 8,237 feet. That is the elevation of the top of the flow for a 100-year storm. And the map is colored such that the hatch-marked areas within the floodplain is the floodway. So that's the primary channel. And then the flood fringe is the light blue area. The tan, kind of yellowish area, that's the 500-year storm. And our code does not address, nor does FEMA address the 500-year storm. It's just a note on the map that if it tops over the 100-year, then it will flood into these areas first. So that's what a firm map looks like. And this big blue area over here is where the confluence of the Level Gulch floodplain comes in. And then it carries in this channel, goes north, and eventually ties into Trout Creek and its floodplain. I want to note that this was revised in March of 2015. That is when the letter of map revision was approved by FEMA, and this map became effective at that time. So now with an aerial, and this is an aerial from the assessor's maps, which they note the floodplains. And if I can point out the roads to you again, this is Woodland Valley Ranch Drive, comes around the curve past the bus barn, and then Longs Point is a private road to the townhome subdivision, and outlined in red are the two units or duplex that's shown just north of the culvert. Culvert goes right underneath the roadway here. You can see the hatch-marked area, that is the floodway, and then the flood fringe is in blue, and the 500-year storm, which is overtops onto the golf course. Here is the site plan for the Longs Point or Sundance development. We're talking about lots 4 and 5 with these 2 new duplexes. You can see this is the culvert and the improvements to Loy Gulch in order to convey the stormwater for a 100-year storm. This was all improved as part of the development of Longs Point and the subdivision. And it has functioned very well over the summer, past several years, and several of the residents are here, so they may be able to speak to how this functions. What you're going to see is that this little corner of the lot and a little portion of this duplex does encroach into that flood fringe. However, it is built 2 feet above the base flood elevation. So it meets the requirement for our for FEMA and our floodplain management. So this is a more zoomed in blow up of the existing floodway and the entire floodplain with the flood fringe. And it was actually Bill Alsbach, our former engineer for the city, who drew this for me. You can see he has laid in the foundation for the new duplex, and you can see that its corner will just slightly encroach. But again, it's going to be built 2 feet above the base flood elevation when the requirement is only to build it 12 inches or 1 foot above. I wanted to share with you a little bit more about the characteristics of the floodplain, and we've spoken already about the floodway and the flood fringe, and you can see that it is within the standards to build residential areas within the flood fringe as long as they are at least 1 foot above this base flood elevation. And the BFE here is at 8,247 feet, and this duplex will be built at 8,249 feet. And that will be certified by the engineer when the foundation goes in order to verify that it was built at least at that elevation or higher. So here's a photo of the existing conditions. You can see the adjoining duplex. The 2 duplexes fit into this area along Longs Point. This is the railing where the culvert entrance is, and the retaining wall that was built to control the water, the flood. There's a photo. I went down into the floodway, and you can see how large that culvert is, which has functioned very well. It's really quite good in this area. And again, the standards for residential construction that this proposal complies with is that the lowest floor will be 2 feet above base flood elevation. They have submitted a soils and erosion control plan. We will also look at that very closely when the zoning development permit is submitted in order that it complies with the site plan. And then landscape plans were approved in 2008. So this is the 2008 grading and erosion control. You can can see the photos that I showed you were taken right down into this area by the culvert. And then the landscape plan, they do a very nice job of landscaping in this development, and they have a very strong HOA that takes care of this infrastructure as well as their landscaping. We did follow the publication requirements in the official newspaper. Letters were sent to the adjoining property owners, and there were posters for this hearing set up. So with that, we recommend moving to approve the flood hazard development permit application and landscape plan subject to 2 conditions. This permit is valid for 180 days. Once we issue it, then they must start, or they would have to come back and renew their permit, and that the design engineer certified that it is constructed the lowest floor at an elevation of 8239. Be happy to answer questions, and the applicant is here as well as the engineer for this project.
Sally, 2 quick things. None of the other lots, as you pointed out, that are currently built on, did any of them require similar permits?
They did not.
Okay. And then the second question is concerns about runoff as a result of this being built up a little bit to satisfy the permit requirement. Can you comment on that?
Sure. This development was looked at very carefully by the city engineer, and it was designed to accommodate stormwater detention. So our city's stormwater detention requirements release the flow at historic rates, and we're required to detain the 100-year storm, the 5-year storm, and 75% of the 2-year storm. So we have very stringent requirements, and that was all built into this in order not to inundate the Loy Gulch floodway.
Applicant want to say anything at this point? Now we'll move on to open public comment. We shall open the public comment. Is anybody signed up to talk about this? Okay. Name, rank, and serial number, Brooke.
Yeah, you had a whole bunch over there.
Hi, good evening. My name is Brooke Smith. My wife Carolyn and I live at 1324 Longs Point, which is just north of this site. We're in the same subdivision, obviously, as this property under consideration. Our home and all the existing homes in Sundance at Shining Mountain are downstream from this proposed development. Before proceeding, I want to make it very clear tonight that we do not object to this project at all. In fact, we are in support of the developer's plan to complete the build-out of our subdivision. We are concerned, however, with this particular location because at completion, it will be the first building in our subdivision located within a designated flood hazard area. All of our existing homes are located adjacent to this Loy Gulch special flood hazard area.
Double click.
Did I get it? Oh.
Double click.
just showed you this. Sally mentioned this earlier about at completion, what the flood lines will look like on a particular lot. Lot 4 in this drawing is our lot up north of this site. And if you look to the left, just outside our west property line, you can see the 500-year flood line and the 100-year flood line. And that's what is done. It's certified by a surveyor, and it shows on the ILC so that everyone can see where the flood lines are. What you have to think about is what the flood lines are going to look like on this
He is 4.
property that's under consideration. They will be up on the particular building itself, which we have not experienced before.
Excuse me, Mr. Smith. I would like to clarify the lot number in the system. First of all, the lots that I referred to as 4 and 5 are based on a site plan, not a final plat. Mr. Smith's lots have been subsequently final platted, and so they have a designation of 4.
Ron, we received, what number would they be?
No, we would be north of that.
Yes, they would be on there, but I'm not sure which number his is. Thank you.
Sure. I want to put back up attachment C that Sally showed you earlier. It's very similar to what she showed, and it does show the building site and the southwest corner of the building in the blue floodplain area. The problem that I had with that is that it's at a very small scale. And what I wanted to do is see, well, what did this look like if we could get it on to a much larger scale? And so the sheet that's up there on the thing and is on your page 3 of your handout shows the same flood lines as best I could get them on there of what it's going to look like on this particular lot. Now, the blue areas are very, very similar to what was shown on attachment C. You can kind of ignore the 500-year lines there. But what's of most concern to me is the floodway, which you can see comes under the culvert and swings around starts swinging to the north. And if you'll notice, it impacts the southwest corner of the particular piece of property. And that is a major concern, because if you start doing anything to the floodway, there are a number of other requirements that are in the city codes that relate to construction or any alteration of the floodway. Now, they're not going to build the home in the floodway, but what I'm concerned about is any kind of grading, storage of materials, removal of willows, or anything of this nature that would affect potentially the floodway, which would potentially affect us further downstream. This document here was part of the city's approval document. I had a couple of problems with this, and if you'll notice, I corrected them or gave my input in red checks. The proposed development is located in the following area of special flood hazard. Check all that apply. The only one that's checked is the AE zone, which is the blue. And we all agree that certainly the house is in the blue. However, the property is also in the floodplain and in the floodway, and there are areas immediately adjacent to the special flood hazard area. I think those two should also have been checked. But of more concern to me is item 7, where it says, yes, FEMA approval of a water course alteration. I do not believe that was done. Is that correct?
That was checked yes because of the LOMAR that was approved in 2015.
Right. I'm talking about any watercourse alteration because of this project.
It's not because of this project, it was the subsequent construction.
Right. But this project has the potential, when you start looking at what it takes to build on one of these lots, removal of dirt, movement of equipment around, etc., has the potential of getting into that floodway area. And that's of concern to us. So on page 5 of the handout, I've just given a couple of alternatives there of what I think we could be looking at. I don't think item 1 is worthy of discussion because if you read the city code relative to construction or doing any alteration of a water course or floodway, you're talking about major delays in the project. I don't want to see that, and I don't think anybody does. What I'm suggesting in number 2, prior to any construction on the property, the applicant will provide a barrier of some type along the west side of lots 4 and 5, that's the property, approximately along the east line of the existing willows, to prevent any work, removal of the willows, fill, or grading in or through the floodway area. So I'm just asking that we make sure that during the construction process, and we don't get down in that floodway area and do anything to alter that. I have no other problems with the rest of the project.
Thank you. I have a question, Sally. This map that Brooke provided, is that also your map?
No, that was Mr. Smith's drawing.
How accurate is that compared to ours?
It's fairly similar. And Mr. Smith's proposal for number 2 is acceptable. I believe the builder can abide by those rules.
Okay.
Okay?
Now, is this thing actually built in a floodway, as he said on that checkmark?
It's not built in the
No.
floodway.
You
It's
checked
just
off
that
floodway.
No, the blue is the 100-year flood plain, and the corner of the building, southwest corner of the building will be in that. But
Not
it's
in the
going to be
flood,
elevated.
not in the floodway itself.
It is not in the floodway.
It's in the floodway area. That's what you said.
It's in the
right
floodplain.
Okay.
The floodway area is on the southwest corner of the property.
Okay. All right. I just
Okay.
want to clarify that. It's not actually in the floodway.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. Anybody else from the audience would like to come up and speak to that? Figured that he was probably representing a lot of folks, so we let you run over the 5 minutes. That's good. We're doing a good job covering that. Okay. Anybody else? Public comments? If not, we'll close public comments and we'll go to rebuttal. There's no rebuttal, I don't think. Questions among us? Any questions among us for the applicant, for staff? From anybody here? Pardon? Jerry?
I know we're not talking about the south side of the spillway or the area, the culvert, but that also could impact things in the future. Is there any plans for the south side?
There are not any plans for those 3 sites to the south of the culvert.
What could be done there in the future? Could you build there?
If you meet the requirements, it would be quite difficult though because there's quite a bit of fill and
Right.
currently there is also no sewer service to that area. So our hope is that those willows will never be disturbed.
Okay.
Anybody else? At this point, we'd encourage either more discussion or a motion in a second.
I'll move that we approve the flood hazard development permit, FHDP number 18-001, with the conditions
added condition.
added by staff, as well as the condition number 2, added or requested by the neighbor.
Mr. Smith.
Mr. Smith.
Pardon me?
Can I ask a question first? It indicates language suggested required any construction. Does that include any kind of earth movement? I think that's the issue. That would be sufficient to cover that.
It would, yes. Need a second.
Anybody else?
We need a second.
Second.
Any other questions?
We have a motion and a second on the floor. Would you please call the question?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, beginning with Lee Brown. Ellen Carrick,
Yes.
Vicki Good,
Yes.
Ken Hartsfield,
Yes.
Jerry Penland,
Yes.
Peter Scanlon,
Yes.
John DeVoe,
Yes.
Jeff Watson.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you.
And
Come.
thank you,
Brooke.
Mr. Smith, for your astute analysis.
As always. We'll move on to item B. Okay. Sub number 18-004 and SPR 18-003, the Highlands and Paradise Preliminary Plat Site Plan Review and Top of Paradise Master Plan Amendment. Request by Mark McNabb, Mark II LLC applicant, and North Peak Properties LLC property owners for approval to develop an unplatted 7-acre parcel of land as a clustered development zone suburban residential and generally located north of Majestic Parkway traffic circle. Development proposes 13 residential patio homes with a 2.65 acres of open space and access via a new private roadway, Highland Court.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will begin with our presentation tonight to reference the general location of the site for the clustered development of 13 homes on a 7-acre parcel, which is just north of Majestic Parkway. As you can see, its proximity to Highway 24, the center of town as well. This is an aerial photo from Google Earth that I have labeled Majestic Parkway and circled the approximate 7-acre tract that is just northeast of the traffic circle or the roundabout that is on Spacious Skies and Majestic Circle. And you can see its proximity as with relationship to Highway 24 and the downtown area and the school as well in this aerial. A closer aerial to the 7-acre tract shows where the traffic circle is and new construction that has occurred. I might note that the water line and storm drain was installed down through this property a number of years ago when much of this construction in the first phase of the Paradise of Colorado was completed. And I also have drawn in here the boundary of the Pike National Forest. So you can see that the 7-acre tract does not touch the Pike National Forest. It is in a valley and a meadow area with some trees and some topography up in the northwest corner. And you can see that this is a fairly open area. You had approved a new final plat that was adjacent to this last year of 3 lots. Those 3 lots are shown here on Spacious Skies. And the new house on this corner was a parade home a couple of years ago. So that's a bird's eye view of the property that we're going to be speaking about this evening. with respect to the zoning map, I wanted to share with you that the proposed site is down right here near the traffic circle, but it is part of an overall master planned, almost 200-acre section of what's referred to as the Top of Paradise, that's shown and outlined in red. It starts way north of the school, this is the high school, and then heads south all the way down to King's Crown and adjacent to a park site and then a small 8-lot proposal up here on the top of King's Crown. And you can also see by this zoning map that there are a number of lots that have already been final platted in this area. And that part of the final plat has been part of a preliminary plat. And I'll get into more details. But what we're talking about is an area, a very large area that has been master planned for a total of 190 units. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit further to share with you the site. This is Majestic Parkway and Thunder Ridge. Thunder Ridge was a fairly new street that connects to Regal Way and then down to Spacious Skies. The lines here show the preliminary platted area. This is all zoned suburban residential, and it was programmed for a total of 190 units as part of the Top of Paradise, and it's called the amended master plan because there was an earlier version of this master plan that was replaced. And it was in 2005 that the original developer, Mr. William F. Brown, had proposed this and was approved. And this master plan is still valid today. And the only portion that was preliminary platted is shown in red here. And a preliminary plat is the most important stage of a development. And if you hold land adjacent to the preliminary plat, then it must be master planned. So that's why the 200 acres of master planned lots and property is shown and has remained as a valid planning tool for the build out of this acreage. And this has been in place since 2005. And so I've zoomed in a little bit on the more northern section of the master plan and shown you that also in 2005, when this was preliminary platted, it was programmed to be 58 lots on 56 acres. What we're speaking about this evening is this portion of, it was called Majestic Court. Now it will be named Highland Court. And it was programmed for 9 lots with this preliminary plat. So that was the original plan. And I want to point out that right now, this road, which was named Peregrine Court, is now called Lachlan Way. And Lachlan Way is currently under construction. The curb and gutter has been installed. There were construction drawings all approved by the city back when this first filing was done. So the construction drawings for Lachlan Way were approved many years ago, but they did not get developed after this first phase up until now. So that's the area of the preliminary plat. Here is the actual preliminary plat, and I've highlighted in blue the first filing. It's actually filing 2 that was approved in 2008, and it was 29 total lots in the final plat on 25 acres of this first section. And we've recently seen several homes being built in this area, which is terrific. And then in the green is that little 3-lot final plat that was approved last year, and there's one house so far that has been constructed right at Lachlan Way and Spacious Skies. And within this 3-lot subdivision, there are, it's on 1.5 acres. No, yes. They are half-acre lots in this little three-lot section. And then the future filings, Lachlan Way, we just had submitted the final plat this week, and there are 21 lots proposed to be on Lachlan Way. And then the Highlands is what is nestled into this area, being proposed for the clustered development in the meadow area. So that is the fundamental document that, along with the master plan, that guides the future development and eventually gets to the construction and the final plat for a new residential development. So here is the 13-unit clustered development proposal, and it has 4 units on the southeast side of Highland Court. And then the patio homes are paired, 8 of them with 1 single, so 9 of the units are on the northwest side of the drive, Highland Court. Here's the traffic circle, and this has all been improved and ready for construction. And these lines that come down through here are part of the stormwater and the water, because an important part of this overall development was a new water tank. And we have Kip Wiley here this evening so he can speak to the utilities. And the new water tank was very crucial to install and become operative because of the pressure, the lack of pressure for the water system until that tank was built. So that's a very important infrastructure addition to this area. I'm going to go through here, but I should go back. Just wanted to note that the white area in this 7 acres, about 2.5 acres, is all undisturbed, then all will be open space for this clustered development. And it's shown a little bit clearer on the grading plan so that the dotted line are the limits of the disturbance. And so it will encompass the 13 units, and then the balance of the property will remain natural and undisturbed. And that is adjacent to the future single family down here. And then there is a ridge, and you can see it on this topo a little bit, that there is a small ridge that will buffer these 3 single families from this side to the patio homes. And I'm using the term patio home because usually a cluster development means that the homes are tighter together, they're less space, and that a patio home is usually a single floor, single level, with a closer development or pattern of development. And this will all have an HOA so that the homeowner will have a small plot of land, but it will all be maintained through the HOA. And the street is proposed to be a private street maintained by the HOA, just like Long's Point that you just saw at the Sundance development. The utility plan, this shows not only the mains, but it also has the service lines. And with a clustered development, you don't have long driveways with long service lines that will excavate out the trees and the ground. So again, all the white space around here will remain untouched. And the utilities, most of these utilities are already in. It's just a matter of constructing the street and then putting in service lines and constructing each of these homes. This is the drainage, piece of the drainage plan, and Mike Bramlett, the engineer, is here this evening, and he'll talk a little bit about these various drainages and his analysis. The drainage plan has been reviewed and is acceptable to meet the city's criteria, including the new criteria that were adopted in 2014. All these dotted lines are different basins that are analyzed in terms of their runoff, and there is a collection and conveyance system that is being proposed for the street. There's also a little inlet right here that will tie into the underground system, and the surface system has various inlets down here, and down in this corner is the detention pond that will be expanded and will be able to handle that capacity for the 100-year storm, the 5-year storm, and 75% of the 2-year storm. Most communities only require detention for the 100-year storm, so Woodland Park is very stringent on making sure that that historic release rate is managed properly. This is the landscape plan that was submitted. They will be adding trees along the roadway as well as landscaping each of the patio homes, in addition to leaving the undisturbed areas. And this is the preliminary plat. There is a recommendation for this to be updated so that these topos that are not true or the way the ground exists today, but this is the important guiding tool that would move forward to a preliminary or a final plat. It does show each of the lots in this area. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. Some site photos. I took these a week ago, and this is standing up on Laughlin Way, looking toward the south, down into the meadow area. And you can see the views of Pikes Peak from here. It's quite a stunning view from there. And then a more closer look, you can see I've circled the entrance of Highland Court and the traffic circle down here. So the proposed road is expected to follow the contours up through the meadow until it reaches the single family up off of Laughlin Way. And this is from the traffic circle or roundabout looking more northeast, and you can see the curb cut for the future Highland Court, and then looking north into the meadow. You can also see that this is very developable property. It's relatively flat, gentle sloping, a few trees in the area where the 13 patio homes are proposed, and it is up in this aspen area where the open space would be preserved. These photos I took toward the 3-lot subdivision. I wanted to show you that there is this small ridge that will separate the patio homes or the cluster from the single family. And then this photo on the bottom right is taken from Spacious Skies, and you can see the ridge. This is where one of the 3 lots is off of Spacious Skies. So since this is the first cluster development, I want to go through the 8 criteria that are required for a cluster, and begin with the definition of a cluster development. There are lots of slides that will follow here, because not only do we have to evaluate whether it complies with the cluster standards, but it also has to comply with the site plan review and the preliminary plat. So please bear with me as I walk through all the criteria that is necessary to be evaluated for this type of development. But a cluster development means a project that concentrates the number of lots allowable on a parcel of land in specific areas of the parcel to allow the remaining land to be used for open space, recreation, and/or preservation of features and/or structures with environmental, historic, cultural, or other significance. And the first is the design sensitive to the natural features and the topography? So this project does concentrate the 13 units within the most developable portion of the land, the 5 acres, and while in the meadow, and leaves the wooded area and the sloped area untouched. Second, the cluster home reduces the infrastructure and the land disturbance and the impervious surface. If you were to put 9 single-family homes in here, they would have long driveways, long service to their utilities. And with a cluster, you now have shared driveways and closer service lines into that area. So 32% of the overall site remains natural, and less infrastructure, less land disturbance, less impervious surface. Number 3 provides for preservation of unique natural resources. The 2.5 acres of open space in the northwest corner protects the steeper slopes, the forest, wildlife habitat, and scenic views. Number 4, the preservation of historic or archaeological sites, if applicable. Well, this site was part of a dude ranch, 400-acre dude ranch, the Paradise Lodge, Paradise Ranch, that dates back to 1928. And Frank Snell operated the dude ranch. It was a very popular site between 1950 and 69. However, there are no relics in this area, and in fact, this has been slated for development since the 1970s. And the relics that are left of the ranch now are in Chimney Park. There's a few chimneys, and then there is a chimney north of here in the forest. And so that's really all that's left of that ranch. Number 5 connects with existing greenways, parks, open space in the community. The Paradise neighborhood is served by Chimney Park, although the park is undeveloped. It's a nice natural area. It does have the 2 chimneys. Lachlan Way provides for access to the Pike National Forest, and the new 2.5-acre open space provides for new connections back to the forest as well. This is a neighborhood that is very walkable. It's low traffic. We do not require sidewalks in single-family residential areas. Sidewalks are only required in commercial or multifamily developments. So, and I'll be showing you on the Parks, Trails, and Open Space map. So this is Highway 24 with sidewalks on both sides. And then to the west of Highway 24 is the Fountain Creek Greenway. This is known as the American Discovery Trail. And a number of years ago, the city did have a grant to be able to put in this underpass and the trail that goes over to Paradise Circle. Majestic Parkway is actually wide enough to stripe bike lanes, and so the Parks, Trails, and Open Space map notes with a brown dotted line that future bike lane could be added to this street. It has a mat of 32 feet wide, so you could easily add 4 feet on either side for a bike lane. And the subject site tonight, you can see that it is very walkable to go up Spacious Skies. Lachlan Way is not shown here, but this little yellow spot is the city water tank, and it was intended that this would be a trailhead to the Pike National Forest. And then down on the southern side of the top of Paradise, there is an existing trailhead off of Kings Crown Road, and this yellow line is what we refer to as a primitive trail. There are many, many social trails throughout this area, but they are not on the Forest Service's system trail, and so they are not shown on our Parks, Trails, and Open Space map, because we only want to show system trails, and eventually we hope to have a system trail up in this area. So yes, it is very walkable and connecting. Provide common spaces and facilities that cultivate neighbor interaction. The open space encourages interaction. The shared driveways and the homeowners association will maintain the private roads, and that creates cooperative relationships among the neighbors. Fosters walking or biking. Again, the local streets are low traffic volumes. They do connect to future bike trails and walking trails in the forest. And then lastly, the 8th criteria deals with the architectural elevations meeting or exceeding design standards. These patio homes are aesthetically pleasing. They have stone accents, stucco, corbels, and here's an elevation showing the multiple materials that are used, being proposed. The walls and the roof have lots of great articulation. There are arched windows, transom windows on top, and shutters, so they are very, very nicely designed and meet our architectural standards. Moving on, to dimensional standards within this suburban residential zone, the density is 1 dwelling unit per gross acre. And the master plan calls for 190 units in the overall 200 acres. This stays within that pattern, and the ratio here is 1 unit for a half acre. That is not unsimilar to some of the surrounding lots in this area. And even the early filings of Paradise, which were developed under prior to 1996, those were based on up to 3 units per acre with a minimum lot size of 15,000 square feet. The maximum height for structures is 30 feet. These patio homes are single stories, so they'll be well below that. The maximum building setbacks, a cluster allows for the homes to be closer than 25 feet to the road. So these are planned to be 12.5 feet from the front and the rear, and the units between are at least a 10-foot separation. That complies with the cluster standards. The minimum lot area for a cluster proposal, there are no minimum lot areas. These lots will range from 5,200 square feet to 6,500 square feet, and the footprints of the homes are 3,200 to 2,900 square feet. The minimum lot frontage for a cluster, there's no minimum lot frontage requirement. Typically, it would be a 40-foot lot frontage unless it's on a cul-de-sac. Housing types, a cluster does allow for duplex. There are no duplexes proposed. These will all be detached, single-family homes. The site density in the open space lots are exempt from the 40% open space for a cluster. So this allows for a concentration of smaller lots with 1/3 of the 7 acres undeveloped. Land use intensity ratio, also clusters are exempt from the maximum lot coverage requirement. The parking requirements in a cluster, you still have to meet at least 2 parking spots off-street. Lots 2, 4, 6, and 8 do not show the 2 spaces, so there is a condition that be adjusted. It can be easily taken care of by the location of the driveway. The street standards allow for variations. This proposal is for a 40-foot road right-of-way. Staff supports that, but it still will have the required street dimensions. Our street dimension for the asphalt mat is 24 feet wide with a 2-foot curb and gutter on either side, and the cul-de-sac meets the radius that a fire department and our engineering specifications call for. So even though the road right-of-way is smaller, the improvements will meet the engineering code and standards. And we're trying this also out at Stone Ridge at a PUD, which allows for a variation in road standards. Moving on to the site, the standards for a site plan review. This is the code compliance. First, you have to look at whether it is compliant with our plans. Our guiding document is the comprehensive plan, and the comprehensive plan supports smart growth. A cluster proposal is a smart growth tool that eliminates or reduces the amount of disturbance, makes the infrastructure smaller. It provides for a unique and innovative approach, and in the right locations and developable land, it makes sense to propose a cluster. It provides for a diverse type of housing, and it protects our environment. The city regulations dealing with grading, erosion control, design, parking, tree retention, lighting are all adhered to and in compliance. The traffic, 9 units would have generated 90 average daily trips. It's about 10 trips per home that is used, with 4 more homes on Highland Court that would have a net of 40 more trips. However, again, the overall density of this top of paradise does not change. The topo, soils, drainage, environmental, and hazardous features we feel have all been addressed. The water, sewer, waste, solid waste, and air quality. The city has the capacity to serve with potable water. This is in our build-out plan, and the sewer wastewater treatment plant has just been expanded to be able to accommodate a population of over 14,000 in the city. Fire and safety hazards. This development will occur or be under the 2015 International Residential Code, as well as the current fire codes. And as far as compatibility, it is buffered by a ridge to the west and open space to the northeast and around the property. It also has aesthetically pleasing architecture. It will be of very high quality, as well as the HOA will ensure high maintenance standards. More site plan review design standards. They are applicable. These design standards are applicable to this clustered development with respect to open space, the bikeway or pathways. Residential development does not require sidewalks, so it's not applicable. Many of these design standards are for commercial development, so with a residential development, it's slightly different. The tree retention, the trees are protected where they are in the outside the meadow for the most part, and they're in the open space as well as a landscape plan. There's no parking lot landscape code that applies to commercial. The lighting, we have placed a condition that the details on lighting be submitted in order for us to review prior to the ZDP being issued. Lighting is required to be full cutoff, fully shielded, no glare. The developer does plan street lights, but we will review that plan. The building placement, this is the siting of the building is in the most developable areas. It's designed for passive solar. It's not on any ridge. It minimizes the cut and fill and the spacing and with respect to the topography. The orientation to the buildings maximizes views. There are 4 units on the east adjacent to the other single-family future lots, and the ridge provides a buffer. The mass, scale, and proportion is in context. The footprint size is similar to the neighborhood. The landscaping softens this cluster. the architectural guidelines. It has a uniform design. The facing materials are stucco and stone. There's no reflective materials on these homes. The facades are similar to the surrounding homes. The colors will blend into the natural environment with earth tones. The details to the architecture enriches these homes with the arched windows, the shutters, the corbels. There are no blank walls on each of these designs. The lighting is to be submitted. The mechanical equipment is not shown. If this were a commercial project, they would have to be either screened or similar color. And there are no retaining walls proposed in this site plan. Now on to the standards with a preliminary plat. So the preliminary plat designs and drawings are complete. They just need a little minor revision. The technical information is prepared by the licensed surveyor, which is all in line with our code. The supplemental material has been submitted, which are the letter of intent. The master plan is still valid. There are no geological hazards in this area. The civil drawings have been either completed or will be resubmitted for the roadway. There is a variance on the width of the right-of-way to 40 feet, and there are no hillside lots proposed. That's when it's greater than 30% slope is a hillside lot. For the design standards, it regards an orderly layout with streets and easements. The purpose of the preliminary plat, it encourages an innovative approach, protects the environment, compatible with the neighborhood due to the design and the location. The site considerations is, this is a very suitable area for development, and the streets and alleys comply. IREA did ask for additional easements, so that is one of the conditions. Moving on, still with the preliminary plat standards, there's no requirement for minimum frontage in a cluster. The improvements will be according to the engineering specifications with the 40-foot road right-of-way. The street name we have cleared through. Majestic Court was actually not available. We have to clear these names through E911 that include both El Paso and Teller County, and we will be signing address numbers to each unit. The easements, we have to expand. They showed a 5-foot easement around the street perimeter, but our requirement is for 10, so that can be met, and then IREA's request as well. The lots are reasonably arranged and very buildable, and it is exempt from the land use intensity ratio. Getting close to the end. With respect to referrals, this was referred out to the Public Works Department, Utilities, Parks and Recreation, IREA, the Fire District, Black Hills, CenturyLink, and Cable. And their comments have been integrated into the staff report, public notices for surrounding properties and posters and publication in the newspaper has all been done according to our regulations. And tonight it is the role of the Planning Commission to make a recommendation to the City Council. It is, however, the City Council who makes the final decision on this application. Staff recommendation, we are asking for 2 motions this evening. The first motion deals with the site plan review based upon the testimony and the evidence that you hear. There are 5 conditions that will need to be met prior to a zoning development permit being issued to move forward with road construction or home construction. First, the shared driveways must be modified for 4 of the lots in order to provide the 2 off-street parking spaces. They need to submit an acceptable lighting plan so that all fixtures shall be downcast so as not to create glare or cast direct light beyond the limits of the property. The final landscape plan needs to include a plant schedule and maintenance plan. The grading plan needs to be submitted in accordance to the city standards, and a final utilities plan that includes the easements for IREA. Motion number 2 is dealing with the preliminary plat and amending the Top of Paradise master plan. And this, we have also 5 conditions. I added a 5th this evening, but in your packet, the first 4, we would like to see on the preliminary plat the existing topography for Tract A and identify any 30% slopes or greater. The utility easements need to reflect accurately on the preliminary plat. Submit all construction drawings for the city engineer's review and approval prior to final plat submittal, and then also a variance application for the 40-foot road right-of-way. The minor update in the drainage report is just, I noticed that it speaks to El Paso County instead of Teller County. Very minor. So with that, staff recommends approval, and we'll turn it over to the applicant. Thank you for your patience.
Would the applicant come forward, give us the information?
Hello, my name's Mike Bramlett. I'm with JR Engineering, located at 5475 Tech Center Drive in Colorado Springs. I'm also a resident of and live at 831 Majestic Parkway, right across from the detention pond. And I think, Sally, I brought some maps.
Here's the drainage plan.
I think that would be fine for just talking for this. Our role in this project was to look at the overall, Our role was to look at the overall drainage, address some of the issues that had been brought forward by the community, and do the drainage and grading designs for the project in question. So when we first started this project, and I've been personally involved in this project even when it was with Will Brown. JR Engineering did the engineering for the overall development. And when I got involved in earlier this year, the first thing I did was I met with the city engineer, who at that time was Ben Sheets, to try to understand what he was looking for from an overall drainage concern, because he had pointed me back to some issues that had been brought forward in filing 3 with regard to the community. And he was also concerned that the drainage criteria had changed in the time period from when we first designed our work in 2006 to today. Then the applicant Mark and I met with Doug Ball and Dan McClendon, which were the 2 individuals in the community that had done some of the heavy lifting on defining some of the concerns. And when we met with them, they had 3 primary concerns. And really, it was overall drainage planning as it relates to future development. And the detention area, its ability to manage that future development. And then from what I got out of it, one of their main concerns was the lack of maintenance with regard to erosion control. Now, I will tell you that the erosion control issues that they brought forward are not relative to this site or Lockland Way. They are relative to undeveloped land to the east. As we just started doing our study, we went to try to define the overall basin. We had looked at this once before. And this basin, this drainage basin, which is comprised of many sub-basins, which is what you're seeing up there, the overall basin is 240 acres nominally. Of that, over half is in national forest. And that presents its own set of issues. The good news is you never have to worry about future development in the national forest. So the water coming off now is the water that will be coming off in the future. The storm sewer had been installed as part of the original Paradise. So we had storm sewer installed all down Lockland Way. We had storm sewer all up Majestic Court, now Highland Court. We had storm sewer to the east in the undeveloped area. And then we have storm sewer into the pond. And as you all know, the pond then eventually discharges to Majestic Parkway. When we looked at it from an overall standpoint, with the development of filing 2, filing 3, filing 4, which is Lockland Way, and Mr. McNabb's development, Highlands, we determined that the detention pond with the new criteria was just slightly undersized. And so we have come up with a design that enlarges the pond, and it enlarges the pond just in general terms from 8.3 acre feet of storage to 8.95. So just a small, less than 10% change. But that was to meet the criteria in play today. We modeled this using acceptable materials. You have to go to a much higher level model when you get into these large basins. So we use CUHP SWIM, which is what is used all across the state of Colorado, Colorado Urban Hydrograph, and SWIM, Stormwater Management. When we look at the specific improvements necessary within Highlands, we felt that the best option available to us, and this is one thing that is good about the layout being proposed today, because as Sally mentioned, the open area in the northeast corner of the site, that's actually a meandering drainage way. Not the entire, the biggest drainage way is actually up on Lockland Way. But it is a meandering drainage way, and we're able to put an inlet out there to collect those flows and keep them from traveling overland any farther, get them in the storm sewer. We also protected the site from off-site flows, because most of it's coming from the National Forest. And we'll have a drainage swale along the eastern edge of the disturbed area. We don't want it, at one time we had put it up even closer to the property line. But in an effort to limit disturbance, we've got it nearer the houses. And we also have a drainage swale on the west side, in between the ridge and the homes. Those swales will convey water down to both Spacious Skies, Majestic Court, Red Hawk Ridge. It's all in that traffic circle, where there are 2 inlets. One's a 22-foot long inlet on the east side, and the other is a 60-foot long inlet on the west side. We checked the capacities of those, and they are fine with the developed flows. And that's the drainage. If there's any questions, I can answer them. Yes.
I've got a question. It's been about a year since we addressed this problem. There were several residents along the Majestic Parkway corridor itself that were experiencing a lot of flooding. One gentleman, if I remember right, I might be a little bit off on the figure, $85,000 damage to his house. Another neighbor, $45,000. Do you feel these small changes will help address the water flow going down Majestic?
Yes, I do feel the changes. The bigger issue was water flow not going down Majestic and coming across the backs of these lots and into their basements. And that's been addressed through well, it hasn't been addressed entirely, but there are plans in place to address that. This is not on the property to the north where we're developing, or where Mr. McNabb's developing now. It's more the property to the east. The water going down Majestic, when we just had that storm this year, we had 2 inches in an hour in July-ish.
July 23rd.
We had pictures taken during that storm to make sure that the pond was behaving as we expected it to. We watched the flow come out of the discharge to Majestic, and we watched it go down the street, and there was no evidence that it was releasing itself into someone else's, into private property and causing damages. So I believe from an engineering standpoint, those issues have been addressed. This development would not exacerbate them, but the pond will always discharge to Majestic Parkway. It doesn't discharge as much as allowed. It never has. The standard to which we designed to is historic flow. This pond is discharging to about 30% of historic flow. And it's limited that way on purpose because of the capacity of Majestic Parkway. I checked the capacity of Majestic Parkway based on the engineering standards we use, and the discharges that we have in the 100-year event are less than the capacity of Majestic Parkway to carry within its right-of-way.
Another question that I have is, how many acres are back in that area? As far as 197.7 acres back there? As far as that whole area back there?
The area that's undeveloped east is about 70 acres, I believe.
Okay, and what about north or west, or what is the whole encompassed area
If you had the master
undeveloped?
plan, I think that shows. Yeah, master plan. The majority of the 190 acres is to the north, and it goes all the way over to the school area, almost to the street in front of McDonald's, and goes east almost to Kings Crown.
So then if there's that much acreage, I don't understand why the cluster development would even apply. I mean, there's so much available area up there, why would you put a cluster development in that area?
I'll probably pass on that question, and I'll leave that up to the developer. I'm the technical engineer in this case. Drainage and utilities, I'll give you a thumbs up, and then I'll stay out of that discussion if that's okay. Thank you.
Yeah, John, just to follow up on that, I'd have to watch the video to remember exactly what we discussed, but I remember some discussion a year ago about the drainage problem in the eastern area, and that we were going to consider looking at that before we approved any more housing in that area.
I agree.
That's what I remember the discussion a year ago, but like I said, I'd have to go back and look at the video to see exactly what we said at that time.
And it was also to the city, one of the city engineers also had agreed upon that.
Yes.
With Mr. Street.
Correct.
And no more development until that was...
And that wasn't about that little area over there, that east. That was the entire area.
I would reinforce what you said, Jerry and Vicki, that the neighbors' concern at the time was really looking ahead to future development and trying to address issues that may not be within the purview of this developer
Right.
or that developer, but their concern
Big
was
picture.
that they were never going to be addressed, and the whole place was going to be developed eventually, and then Still, there would be the flooding issues from, I'll call it, for lack of a better term, the perimeter areas that weren't under the control of a particular developer.
And from my memory, I believe it was Sally Riley that was going to be contacting the landowner concerning.
And we can give you an update. So let's just hold that thought and we'll get through the testimony. Thank you.
Good evening, Tony Perry, 330 Ponderosa Court, also a neighbor, representing the owner of the, I think what's been referred to as Upper Paradise. Would like to give just a couple of minutes of kind of history of particularly Filing 2 and Upper Paradise, because I think it speaks to the intention and the follow through of what we've been doing there. Filing 2 was a property and Upper Paradise during the economic crisis. Park State Bank and Trust got those properties back. I went back and did a recent calculation to look at the asset and capital expended on this project of Filing 2 and Upper Paradise, and it's northwards of $5.5 million. So it's a significant asset capital issue, and for a $100 million bank, it's pretty significant. But one of the things that we recognized when we got this property back, we believe the previous developer that it was a special property, not only in Woodland Park, but also on the Front Range in general. When we looked around the Front Range and what was going on, we knew it was important. We knew it was important to protect. There were several things we had to do through that process of getting that property back. We completed the stormwater drainage plan, which was critical to the issue you just addressed. And by the way, your recollections of last year's meeting are similar to mine, frankly. We also deeded over the water tank to the city and gave the cobblestone streets, if you will, to the city, and what's now Lachlan Way to the city, which is going to be paved here shortly. Which I'm sure the city will be happy about. We also expended significant time, resources to get the Metro District in compliance with state regulations and requirements, which was quite a significant effort. Why is that important? As a community bank, we did not want to take the approach of fire selling the property. Frankly, with the values we were talking about, even with that significant number, we could have discounted those lots pretty significantly and probably moved them on versus taking the approach that we did. We're very proud of the fact that in Filing 2 we have great new neighbors in our community. Lot 2, Lot 3, Lot 5, Lot 12, Lot 8, Lot 25, Lot 28 is being built currently. We know of 2 others that are coming on, a couple from Florida coming on Lot 9 and 10. 3 of those homes were parade homes. One of the homes that we previously helped support just sold again because the party with his young kids decided to be down in the Springs for the school district, and that just sold for $1 million. And, what we would like to say is that we took great pains to protect the property. It was private property, but we also recognized that we were neighbors too, and so all the folks who walk up in there, which are quite a few, continue to walk up in there. It's not an issue for us. We haven't posted any private property signs, despite potential liability. But what I really wanted to speak to is that, we know this is special. We know the neighborhood is special. When we sold Upper Paradise to a close party, private party, they and we are committed to continuing that effort to add value to that area and to the community. We do believe that this type of home is the trend. If you look at the studies nationwide with the demographic in particular we have coming into Woodland Park, fits the trends. I will say that the owner of Upper Paradise, who engaged the developer to complete this, is planning on building, hopefully in the next couple of months, and being a resident here in the spring. So I guess I just wanted to say that, we took this, we think we added value to the neighborhood, and we think we continue to do. One of the things that we did was we had I guess it's called courtesy meeting, I guess that's what that was called, with the neighbors, and frankly received a lot of great feedback from the neighbors. I think you'll see the original kind of proposal from the developer was 21 units in this area versus the 13 that we're asking for now. I think you'll see a little bit more sensitivity to that, especially that open space up to the right where the aspens are, which is a beautiful piece of property. We always intended to have access to the National Forest because we knew that was important, and a historic kind of gaming trail that's used today by all of us, I think, that live up there. And more importantly, from a financial perspective, obviously the number one thing that we heard through this entire process from multiple neighbors was the potential impact on the value of their homes. They perceived these patio homes as potentially reducing the value of their properties. And true, it is not the same vision of the original developer, but I would argue that was approximately 12 years ago now. The market has changed. The days of certain, I guess, call them McMansions, that has dwindled and are been minimized. And so the demographic really is going to smaller. They do want less maintenance, which is why the HOA. And oh, by the way, the very tough design guidelines of filing two, the developer pretty much adopted all of them except for a couple, I think, which in the end, in the current market with the current materials, is really not that germane in our opinion. So what I wanted to address, and I'll be done, is the neighbors. What I think I've heard is their number one concern, the value of our homes. And so what I did previously at the previous courtesy meeting was we went back and looked at pretty much every street, and I'll give you the detail here, that's anywhere near this subject property. Went on the county website, basically put every street in a spreadsheet on its own tab, fed that up to a summary sheet, which you'll see basically on the third page of the handout we're about to give you. And without getting too technical or trying to do too much analysis, basically just computed, based on all those properties, which are significant, a square foot value for the livable area. One of the good things that came out of the neighborhood meeting was, well, why aren't you using realtor data? Great point. Hadn't thought of it, frankly. So we did have a realtor get us the most recent, I think, 13 sales is, I think, what she sent us. And so we look at that per square foot value as well. And then we kind of compared it to the projected cost of these units, just to give us, and again, went back and looked at the data because I had a few typos on the previous presentation, but it's not really meant to be super scientific. I didn't worry about medians and standard deviations or anything like that. It's just kind of to give us a relative idea of the value of these homes, since a lot of the neighbors were really concerned about that. So based on page 2 shows the realtor data from a RE/MAX agent with the 13 most recent sales, including one in Paradise, filing 2. The per square foot cost is, or value is 162.70. Based on the county data, which is a much larger data set, as you'll see, because there's about 19 pages of detailed every street, every home. We didn't put any addresses. It's not about that. It's just about, what does the data tell us? The value was 195.61. And so if you take the square foot that Sally mentioned in the proposal and look at the value of these homes, which would be anywhere from $550,000 up. I can tell you, I think the first one that's scheduled is going to be closer to $800,000. That's about a $250 a square foot value. Okay, so hopefully the data will show that the intent here isn't to harm the value of our neighbors, the value of the neighborhood. I will tell you that the owner of Upper Paradise is super dog friendly, super pedestrian friendly, wants to be a good neighbor, and wants to live in one of these homes, and wants it to be as natural as possible, which I think I'm actually personally more pleased with the second iteration after the feedback from the neighbors than the first. I think it's a nice blending. I think the open space really makes a big difference. I believe it's good for the market, and I'll just basically make one final statement. The Highlands in Paradise serves a housing market need in Woodland Park and will add value to the adjacent properties. So, and I'll give you these handouts for your dad. Yes, ma'am.
I've got a question. For me, meeting the needs of, the cluster development itself, under the definitions, just because a developer wants to do a cluster development doesn't give you an automatic right to do a cluster development. You have to meet certain criteria, basically historic or architectural sites, to promote greenways and open spaces. And that's criteria has to be met. And I don't understand. How is this project addressing that? How is it?
Well, I think
Otherwise, I see this huge piece of property, and you're just cutting it down to the less than 8 acres, and you're putting X amount of properties on it, but it doesn't meet the qualifications for the clustered development.
Well, I guess from my perspective, I'll beg to differ. I think this does meet the standards, and I think Sally did an excellent job of laying that out. I will say that, I'm a little bit of a history buff on Woodland Park, like I think a lot of you are. If you go back and look at some of the original pictures, even pre the Dude Ranch that was there, and actually Chimney Park is in our backyard, so we're a neighbor too, from my wife and I. All of that was open space, and you can find pictures of cows, and in fact, if you hike up in the National Forest, you'll see an old kind of bathtub, if you will, that used to be one of the watering devices. So I respectfully disagree. I think this project meets those standards. I think from a market perspective, the patio home that's appointed the way that we're talking about meets a market standard, and that's really, from my perspective, where we're coming from, is it's a market need. We are asking for 4 additional units versus the 9 that were preliminary platted approved, and that's just, frankly, to make the numbers work. And to make the HOA and the intent of that cluster, I don't like the term cluster, but it's what we have in our code, that'll make that area, I think, work. And, the other thing I want to point out, because the drainage thing is a big deal, and I can't speak to the property owner to the east, but I want to make it very clear, and I think Mike did, but I wanted to reiterate it, that we were at that meeting last year. It was news to us in terms of those issues that were happening back those years. What I think I saw was, I think the city jumped into action and took measures to clean out, I guess, the culverts or whatever that was called. I will tell you that I can stand here and categorically state we do not believe any of those flood waters came from Upper Paradise or Filing 2, and I think the engineer might be able to verify that. We followed all the code with the drainage plan at the time. This development has to go to another level because the standards have changed, and that's fine. All of this infrastructure that we're completing, just like the water tower that the original developer put in to feed all of us that live down there over to King's Crown. We're doing it right. We're not trying to skimp. It's not finance. It's actually privately funded with investment dollars, not finance dollars. So it's being done right. The developer does not have to meet any kind of market criteria in terms of this is your budget and we're not doing anything else. He's been told very clearly, do it right the first time. Let's make sure if we need that extra engineering, if we need whatever extra, let's get it done. And so that's what we're doing. So again, I respectfully disagree that the criteria for this haven't been met. I definitely understand the neighbors' concerns in terms of it's kind of different for this area. But I do believe, being a market person, that it is a market property, and I think these will sell out fairly quickly. And I think these will be, again, like we have in Filing 2, additional great neighbors to our community. Thank you. And I'll turn it over to Mark McNabb, the developer.
I only have 2 pages. I'm Mark McNabb. I live at 206 Starlight Heights in Divide. I'd like to address first the question about 1 year ago when I believe it was Mr. DeVoe made a statement, until we address the engineering issue, we can't address it for development up here, which made a lot of sense. The city immediately went out. Ben was the engineer at the time, and we got Mike involved. We traversed the properties out there numerous times, met with some of the neighbors that had concerns who were engineers. We had good discussions about the problem. Mike incorporated into all of what he did the study for the whole, all coming down off the National Forest, which was all part of that. Then Ben transferred out, and then I believe now we have a engineer that's contracted to fill in temporarily. Is that? Yeah.
Our farm.
Right. Well, he had Mike even go back and do another more intense study on it to make sure that this thing would really work. So I think we have hit every angle possible on the drainage to make sure that's not a problem. I personally feel that there's other problems. I feel like there's some homes that wasn't designed right drainage against the houses, which is really common here in Colorado. It's done a lot. And any kind of water flow coming down that's more than normal, I could have a problem. So I think there's more issues involved here than the general drainage coming down from National Forest across the properties, especially that we're addressing. I'm going to just read this so I don't get off track, but it's just some comments. As Tony stated, we originally applied for 21 units in a proposed project named the Highlands of Paradise. Then after working with Sally and the Woodland Park staff and also listening to our neighbors, we realized that one of the main requirements for a cluster development was to have open space dedicated to the proposed community. And then we hosted the community meeting. We then reduced our numbers of units to 13 to allow for a large area to be dedicated to open space. The open space we created is more than a third of the 7.07 acres we are proposing to develop. It has 85 to 95% of the trees for the whole property will be preserved. We've also added an adjacent parcel that's part of Filing 4. That's part up on Laughlin Way. There's a lot over in the corner, almost adjacent to this particular project, that we are going to have as open space. We're going to have a means to get to that piece from this other open space that we've been talking about. One reason we did that is because there is environmental and historical things in the National Forest right next to that piece. For example, a spring that's been there. We felt like instead of using that lot to build a home on, we would dedicate it to open space to help with this preservation, adding to, so now we have over 3 acres of open space. This location, the proposed open space, will help protect the environment and historic significance of the adjoining spring. I just mentioned that. Part of this open space coming from Filing 4 can be used by the neighbors, and that's the whole area. That's our plan. We're going to have a walk path through to that that can be used for all the Paradise, people in Paradise, Majestic Parkway can come up and use that to enter into the National Forest. The 4 villas on the east side of Highlands Court are spaced to complement future development to the east. The double lots in the west are buffered with a natural ridge, as Sally mentioned in her presentation, and protects for the larger lots on spacious Skies Drive. Architecturally, we've designed custom single-level villas that reflect, I like the word villa better than patio, so that's what I'm going to use. That reflect Colorado living on the exterior and elegant interiors that cater to single-level living with handicap access throughout. That's becoming a big demand. It doesn't necessarily mean retired people are going to live there. We have people my age and younger that have parents living with them. So single-family living has become a big demand. And so we're going to design all our units to fit that criteria. We're designing these units on the quality level of the parade home in 17 that we did over on Spacious Skies. We won all awards for that house in our category. So these are going to be deluxe homes, inside and out. The value of the homes, as Tony was saying, are starting at $550,000. At $550,000, we're at $250 a square foot, and it's going to be anywhere up to $700 plus once things are added to the homes. This value is in the top 5% of the value of neighborhood homes in the surrounding area. Those statistics that Tony gave you will show you that. Our proposed community will be managed by a full HOA to keep the property in pristine condition and maintain the integrity of the open areas as they presently are. Compliance. To answer your question, I think Sally answered it so well that we fully abide by the criteria of the cluster homes. We comply with the density of the majority of lots in the area with over 1/2 acre per unit. There's a lot of 1/2 acre lots in the area. We comply to the full definition of a cluster community as described in the City of Woodland Park restrictions and requirements. We comply to the architectural design required by the City of Woodland Park fitted with the master plan of the Paradise community. And then finally, the design and density on the 7.07 acre parcel of land is compatible and harmonizes with the neighborhood due to ample open space and less impactful than 9-lot design shown by the existing preliminary plat. Concentrated 13-villa home sites make use of natural contours, afford privacy, and protect the natural vegetation to the extent a cluster development is intended to do. And this, my last statement, President approved preliminary plat for this proposed property is approved for 9 single-family homes. In applying for a cluster community, we are giving a large portion of our land mass for dedicated open space to preserve Colorado nature in return for consideration of only 4 additional homes to complete our community. The other option we have, if we cannot have the additional 4 units, we can go ahead and build 9 units with the same architectural design with a full HOA, private street, and community, but no longer having the open space that is proposed in our application. We feel like that's our other option. So simply, I guess we have a choice between the two.
I've got a question, since we weren't able to go, we were not allowed to go to that meeting that was... Do you have any drawings showing any type of trails or what's planned as far as on a little bit bigger scale so we can understand? Because right now, we're looking at just under 8 acres, and that's all we see. We have no idea what the bigger picture is for that area.
I think that's what Sally presented, in her presentation. I don't know of anything else to add to that.
You said it opened up to Pike National Forest, if I remember correctly, but the property boundaries don't even meet up with the National Forest.
We do have the parcel A, park tract that we're reserving as open space that I just mentioned. It's
See, and we don't know anything about A, or this is all we know. We didn't go to that meeting. So,
well,
Park Track A also doesn't bound the area you're talking about.
yeah, it's up at the top. It's off of the top right corner of this proposed
It's
project.
not contiguous with the area you're talking about.
It's in filing 4, the upper one that Sally talked about.
I don't understand how Park Track A answers the question.
Well, because it's an entry into National Forest. It will be an entry into National Forest for the neighbors to be able to enter. So she was asking, is there ways to get into National Forest trails?
But not from this 7 acres that we're talking about.
Yes, we can, because we're going to have an easement over to that from the 2.5.
Can you display that?
I have to show you the preliminary plat. Let's see.
it's really tiny. It's right here,
I have the pointer, I can show it to you.
going up to this lot. Here's track A. What?
So, Mr. Brown,
Easement, maybe?
it is right up here, a pedestrian easement that would attach to this tract A that abuts the National Forest.
In the open space in this development, in terms of that, or something that's open to everyone, to the public generally?
The 2.5 acres is not. That's for the community.
All right, so this is simply access for the 13
Yes.
villas.
And then we're going to have another access to that park track from Laughlin that will be open to all the neighbors, as I mentioned before.
So you're ended in an interesting note. If you're not granted the 4 extra structures, which means you build 9 homes. If you built the 9 homes, that would cut off access to the National Forest for people living in this proposed development on the left side.
Well, either way, this project will be a private community
Right.
with either 9 units or 13. It's just if we go with the 9, we don't have to have the open space.
Right.
So
Somebody will own, or some set of individual homeowners will own that chunk up in the northeast.
And we'll still build the same homes.
Yeah, okay.
So we're not changing the architectural design. None of that's changing. The only thing we're really doing for the lack of 4 units, we're losing the open space.
Got it. And I presume also probably reconsideration will be given to the contribution of the lot somewhere further.
Correct.
There's obviously no compulsion to provide the city or with any access to that lot.
That lot may stay that way with the access from Laughlin
Okay.
for the community.
Yeah, you framed the issue very well, I thought, at the end.
I do want some clarification. So this green area, land that you're hoping to keep open, that's only for those the villa owners to have that access. So if you live further down Majestic Parkway or else in the rest of the community, that is not for you to hike over to use the trail. Is that correct?
No, but you can come out. You can come around Laughlin, and there'll be 2 entrances to the National Forest from Laughlin.
not, what we're going to do...
How does it meet in control space? It doesn't, it's private.
At this point, what we're going to do is take a 10 minutes, and we're going to resume at 9:10. We'll start with the public comment. There's a list that I'm sure that we have back there that you signed up before we started. Okay? At this point, we're going to open the public hearing portion of this. You know, the public comment, I guess we call that. And do I have a list? We got it on. The system's on. This thing on.
Mr. Chair, I believe there's a group that wants to go first.
We're on the list first.
Oh, great, thank you.
I don't think yours working? I don't think so.
Hey, Dave,
PA's not.
is this working? No?
Okay, now, there. Good. We have a PowerPoint among 3 people, is that correct? Am I reading this right? Claudia Miller, Bill Miller, and Doug Ball. So you have a total of 15 minutes between the 3 of you. Okay? We're going to, 5 minutes a person. No? Yeah, sure. Of course.
We have 5 people lined up. 2 of them to the hospital. Other one to the hospital, the vice with them. There are 2 people, so there's going to be 5 people.
Well, but there's only 3, and it's 5 minutes a person. Okay? So let's start. We count the number of people on here, we're going to be here till about 11:16. But no, that's not going to happen. So whoever of your group wants to start. Name, where are you from?
Tea Trees, what you just had us do was a brain gym when we had our break. We really appreciate having the opportunity.
Name and address.
I'm Claudia Miller. I live at 810 Majestic Parkway.
Thank you.
And again, several of the presenters tonight could not be here due to some extenuating circumstances, but we'll do our best to present their views too. We've had a committee working on this for some time. Can you hear?
Yes.
Okay. We'd like to begin our presentation noting how beautiful that area is above Majestic Parkway. It's truly one of the most picturesque areas in all of Woodland Park. And if you look back here at this slide, you can see our type of comparison of what Cluster would look on the right, and then the unique designs that are our neighborhood on the left. There is historical significance that's been mentioned tonight, that it was a dude ranch, but it also was a migratory passageway for the city elk herd that was established years and years ago. Norman Arbentrott's grandfather, Edward, started that herd. It's usually yearly for that transient trek up to the Rampart Range. The meadow is a unique ecosystem that has a natural habitat for wildlife and unique plants. Another salient feature is its critical role in water absorption. And in polling many long-term residents, they have a great concern about the manner in which this area is being developed. The land has a legacy that is passed on to the new generation, the current residents of the community. What's the common thread is the human spirit of valuing, knowing that this land should be preserved in a manner that respects the integrity of its inhabitants and the neighbors of the community, members at large who value it. Strong neighborhoods are comprised of coexisting in harmony with one another. And in our neighborhood, we have a vision. Oops, gotta go back. What did I do here? We have a community vision statement. Our neighborhood is built on the beliefs that living together in harmony is essential to the well-being of our community, where there's a responsible stewardship of the architectural, cultural, and historical and wildlife of this unique community, thereby defining the values and character of the neighborhood. The neighborhoods in our area have its own footprint. Ours is a neighborhood based on unique single residential homes contouring to the landscape with open spaces creating migratory passages for wildlife. Fences have been prohibited not only to ensure passageway for animals, but also to create a friendly, cohesive atmosphere as a close neighborhood. Relationships are continually cultivated with residents living in harmony with one another. Many of us in our golden years have put our life savings into these investment homes, and with the understanding that this type of neighborhood setting would prevail through various statutes that were in place. In fact, most of us bought our homes with this understanding and our consistent covenants from one filing to the next, of which will be discussed. What's disturbing is that the cluster patio home concept is totally experimental in our community. These are typically placed in areas not adjacent to single residential neighborhoods as being proposed, and for a reason. Its inconsistency poses a strong risk of negatively impacting adjacent residential property values and making it more difficult to sell homes at acceptable values, which puts a permanent strain on residents. The risk goes beyond monetary values to the high risk of transient residents with second homes, rentals, and heaven forbid, Airbnbs. In fact, realtors polled in communities across the state, including Boulder, have shared that cluster residences have been constructed in flat land out of their towns, such as Longmont. Developers were not allowed to place them within city neighborhoods to ensure the integrity of existing neighborhoods. We understand that housing development is imminent in this open space, and we will endure years of construction with heavy truckloads using our roads, excessive noise, and construction crews which pose their own risk of safety in our community. What we don't understand is that in place of building single-family residential homes that would coexist and align with our neighborhood and even Mr. McNabb's current homes, this cluster development is in sharp contrast to what creates harmony that's been set forth in the city's comprehensive plan. This will also allow open sister neighborhoods for cluster development. By contrast, it is a development with a private road and, as we've understood, segregated by fences and perhaps walls. The community spoken of in the Planning Commission staff report is inclusive to the cluster home concepts, while our neighborhood is open to all for walking, hiking, and mingling with neighbors. Is it concerning that in the City Planning Committee's review of the criteria, not one was based on polling the neighborhood in the initial stages of this type of development, recognizing the impact it will have on the long-term residents? Since gaining knowledge of this proposed development by accident over a year ago when it was being shown at a site during the home show, neighbors have met regularly to discuss its impact and brainstorm ways to create a workable solution for all. We ask you to have open minds as we share the perspective of the residents of our neighborhoods in our presentation and consider ways we can work together to create a win-win for all.
Good evening. My name is William Miller, and I live at 810 Majestic Parkway. I apologize for one thing tonight, and that is that we have people out because of certain kind of emergencies, and therefore I'm doing a presentation for someone. I may not be able to answer your questions if you have any, but that's part of it. The other part is mine, and I'll go into that in a second. Okay, to begin with, just to talk about the commonalities in the Paradise Estates in general. We're talking about single-family homes. We're talking about homes that are more than 2,200 or 300 square feet, whatever they're talking about on these patio homes. Most people, because of the pristine area, have decks on their home so they can see either Pikes Peak or they can see, the city and Bluebird Hill and those areas. They're all unique. As Sally pointed out, they have long driveways. Most of them have 3-car garages. Some of them have 2, but because of long driveways, they can get their cars out of the garage even if they have 3 cars, because they can park on the driveway. So the point is that what we're talking about on these cluster homes does not fit with the commonalities of a vast area of that acreage up there. And the additional building up there will be along the same lines that we have today, but this one will be totally out of sync with that. Okay, the other thing, well, it's coming home. I know in cases where Dr. Riley has reviewed other proposals from other developers, she supported the staff, and the staff has supported the fact that in the cases where they've rejected it, there's been potential injury to surrounding property values, loss of neighborhood character, lack of harmony with existing uses, non-conformance with the comprehensive plan policies and map, and increase in traffic congestion. We believe the cluster home concept should be rejected for the same reasons. People that purchased homes purchased on the basis of the master plan. They built or they purchased these homes, and in the plan of August 14, 16, which you can see on the slide, the property zone suburban residential, 1 dwelling unit per gross acre. This amended master plan was valid to August 4th, 2020. Okay? So this just shows the master plan. The top of Paradise preliminary plat, which is valid through August 4th, 2020, you see that the proposed cluster housing now replaces 9 lots, 9 single-family lots that would traditionally have custom-built homes on them. People who purchased property relying on the amended master plan of 2016 thought that the current proposed Highland of Paradise would remain 9 dwelling units. Many people here tonight have purchased homes with the understanding that Paradise Estate and top of Paradise was zoned suburban residential and would remain so. The point to be made on this slide is the top of Paradise preliminary plan dated August 4, 2016. The bottom that's highlighted in dark. In 2009, cluster housing standards were added to Title 17, but these standards did not affect the top of Paradise preliminary plat. And therefore, we don't feel that this should be approved because of that. Okay. That was her presentation. Now I'm going to jump real fast into mine, and I won't take a lot of your time. My background, I'm retired, but it was in business and technology. My degrees were in business and computer science. So let's talk about business for a minute. I noticed Mr. Perry got into this, which was quite interesting, and he's about 3 to 5 years behind on what's going on in the economy today. There was an article, which I have with me right here, from the Gazette just last week. It's the boom in upscale housing taking off in El Paso and Teller County region. In 2013, there were 226 homes priced between $500,000 and $600,000 that sold in El Paso County and Teller region. In 8 months of 2018, 550 homes in the same price range have sold. That's a 59% increase with 4 months left in this year. So the idea that the trend is with cluster homes is ridiculous. And it may have been so 5 years ago when the economy was in the pits, but our economy has improved significantly in the last 2 years, and a lot of changes have taken place. 5 years ago, just 32 homes priced between $800,000 and $1 million sold. In 8 months of this year, 120 homes in this range have sold in El Paso County and Teller. Even 7-figure homes, $1 million to $2 million, went from 30 in 2013 to 59 in 2017 and 58 in 8 months of this year. The conclusion is single-family homes selling between 500,000 to over $1 million is the future economy and the trend in the El Paso County and Teller County region. Cluster homes are not. Now, the calculation, I went to the extent of looking up how Colorado calculates property tax. And I have that formula. It's laid out right here. I'm not going to go through it with you, but I will tell you what the main events are here. First of all, I could find no patio homes up here in Teller County. And I could find a patio home in El Paso County, and the closest thing I could find to that was for sale was in Stratmore Hills. It was 2,000 square feet, ranch style. It's on 1 acre of land, however, so it's got a lot of room on it. It's 3 bedroom, 2 bath, 2 car. It's selling for $349,000. The per square foot cost of finished space is $175 per square foot. Now, if you look at the property taxes on that, you would collect $2,194 in property tax on that, according to the state calculation. You multiply that by 13 homes, and you get $28,522 yearly property tax on that. That's going to these critical services in Woodland Park in order to provide the kind of, fire, police protection. Everybody gets a piece of the property tax. Now, take an actual sale. This actually came from a realtor up here. He gave you a whole list of it, just like Mr. Perry had. This was on Regal Way, 3/4 of an acre, 4,101 square feet, 3 bedroom, 4 3/4 bath, and 3 car garage. It sold for $860,000. The square foot cost finished space was $209. The property tax you would collect is $5,408 on this. You times that by 9 single-family homes, you get $48,672 a year. So the Woodland Park agencies relying on property tax will receive $20,150 less from the total property tax per year. And this is only one example.
I just want to make a point. Are you getting close done? Because he's got 2 minutes left.
2 minutes?
Well, you've taken 8 minutes of your 5.
Well, I'm just about done.
Okay, very good.
Okay? So we've gone through the calculation of the square foot cost of the buyer. And Mr. McNabb was saying he could sell these units for, let me move it to the next slide. He could sell these units for $550,000, $239 per square foot, cost of finished space, it would be based on 2,301 square feet. Now, the conclusion is you take $239 per square foot with 1,800 fewer square feet of living space versus $209 for a single residential. Who wants to take this investment risk? I mean, who's going to pay $239 per square foot for a one level, 2,300 square foot home, 10 feet apart from everybody else? It just doesn't make any sense. And if the sale price of patio villa homes in Colorado Springs are consistent in Woodland Park, then the city will be losing over $20,000 a year. If property values of current surrounding single-family developments decline due to approval of this development, the city will be financially liable for this. It's in your government. Okay? So in general, let me just say this. It's a bad business decision for the city. It's a bad business decision for the developer, because the developer, if they could sell those single-family homes for, I don't remember what the price was, but let's say $800,000, and for 9 of them, they would get $7.2 million. If they could sell the villa homes, the 13 of them, for the $400,000, they get $5.2 million. So they get $2 million less to build this development. So why would they want to do it? Well, it's fast, they can get in and out, and then get their money. And so that's it. Okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Bo, can you then take the 5 minutes that someone else has signed up for?
Sure. Who would that be? I'm sorry, your name again? You are. Very good. Mr. Ball, you're up. You're up. Guys, we're not going to hold you to 30 seconds or 5 minutes. But if we don't do this, we'll be here forever. And that's what the public comment has always been here, is 5 minutes.
I understand that. Can everyone hear me? Okay, my name is Doug Ball, and I live at 1050 Wintergreen Court. And good evening, commissioners. And what I'm going to do is discuss the cluster development and the staff review. Let me get this going here. So this is the definition of cluster development. And if you look in there, you'll see some words. It says here, the means of a land development project that concentrates the number of lots allowable on a parcel of land in a specific area of the parcel to allow the remaining land of that parcel to be used for open space. So basically, skip that. So if you look at that section 1833-125 cluster developments, the municipal code, the code provision which defines the purpose and requirements of cluster developments, that's in other words the whole code. Reviewing this provision, it is clear that the expectation after dwelling units are clustered within a subdivision, the now unused portion of that subdivision shall be available for green space, which means if you have 13 units, you need 13 acres. And even if you cluster them, then the rest is green space. In fact, section 1833-125C1 dictates such. It says the maximum number of dwelling units in a clustered development shall not exceed the number of dwelling units otherwise permitted for that underlying zoning district in which proposed site plan for development is located. And the underlying zoning is SR, which is 1 unit per gross acre. So the cluster, basically the cluster development requires a give and a take situation. As required for the cluster development, there must be a hardship area. So to give you a reason to cluster, which might be a cliff, a river, or a historical thing. So we call it the hardship area. That's what I'm referring to it as. To justify the clustering, the take is the city allowing the developer to cluster all the dwelling units allowed by code within the subdivision. The give is the developer must turn the vacated hardship land into open green space. In this case, there is no hardship area. The land is relatively level, probably the easiest land in Woodland Park to build on. Therefore, this application fails to meet the most important requirement of almost two dwelling units per gross acre, which violates the law. So what we have here is all take in order to maximize profits for the developer, no bid. The planning department's justification for meeting the density requirement is that this does not exceed the overall density of the top paradise maximum density of 190 dwelling units on over 200 acres. The planning department is pulling dwelling units from the master planned area, and I call this fuzzy map. There is no dedicated hardship land, and there is no associated green space given in the master planned area by the developer, which will be platted with this subdivision. The whole master plan area should not be considered because it exists only as a notional preliminary platted area. The fact that there are multiple owners within this 200 acre area makes the idea of a master plan even more notional. And the green space associated with the 4 extra added dwellings is not platted within the subdivision, then does not comply with the cluster development provisions and therefore violates the law. And this used to all be owned by Will Brown as one master plan. Well, now it's owned by, you can see all the different people, all the different owners there. So here's 200 acre master plan showing multiple owners. So in a false argument to use the leftover density from the master plan area to increase density in a subdivision, is it okay to use property owned by others? Can that other person refuse to let them use the spare density? Can the other person be compensated? Is this, if so, will this lead to selling of property rights to others? This is a terrible precedent to set, and this could end up with cluster developments everywhere. So I have a quick handout here. So this is the draft staff report for the meeting on September 13th, which was obviously delayed. And this was going to be a hearing for 21 units on 7 acres. And I'd like to enter this into meeting records. This handout, it's for the September 13th meeting. This is only a draft, and you may not have seen it before because the hearing was postponed to today. A quick look inside. We have circled in red the changes in compliance of this development as it relates to the provisions of the code and comp plan. Approximately 24 does not comply, or now complies under the new staff report for the 13 units. Recommendations have changed from a strong denial to a strong approval, with only one thing that has changed in the application: 8 less units and 2.5 acres of open space. The development application for the draft staff report was submitted on August 3rd, 2018. The current application was received on September 14th by the staff, and they had basically 1 week to make all these huge changes.
Are you about through?
I'll make one more point.
Okay.
If you go to the last page in the back here, I have other points, but I can't make them. You go to this last page, you can see how strong the denial was for this 21 units on the 7 acres. And if you go through that, you see basically the summary of all the denials of the ones that don't comply in the report itself. And if you look at the current staff report for the 13 units, there's all kinds of exaggerations and stretches and how this all can comply now. So I have some examples of that, but I'm out of time.
You're out of time.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Mike Brandville? Mike, 831 Majestic?
I thought that was a sign-in sheet for the
You want to talk? Or you don't want to? Okay.
Thank you.
Might be the last speaker the way we're going, but that's not true.
May not need anymore. So these are comparisons between the 13th staff report on the 13th versus the current one. And this first one, you can see this. You can see in the first one that it partially complies, and then all of a sudden it complies. And in this case, you say, what has changed? Just the one I got from the 13th. Yeah. How can the planning department use the surrounding neighborhood to their advantage just to meet their needs? Then in other cases, the surrounding neighborhood is not given the same consideration. A cluster development must stand alone per the code, and this is why cluster developments cannot be built in SR zones. The next one, this is the one about, this is overall density. In the 13th, there's no mention of the master plan. It was not even mentioned, so it was rightly not included in the density calculations. But on the 27th, you'll see that all of a sudden we talk about the master plan. Is it? It's not the right one. There it is. This is the density one. So basically, this says not compliant because it's 1 unit per third acre. Well, now we have 1 unit per half acre. So therefore, still not compliant. based on the logic of September 13th, but when you look at this current plan, all of a sudden we're introducing all this extra land, and we haven't increased the density over 1 unit per acre for all the land. And this next one here, there's many more like this. I only took out 6 of them, these comparisons. So this talks about the ridge being a buffer. The ridge, in today's report, the ridge is only buffering 3 homes on Spacious Skies, again, no consideration of the surrounding areas, which would be the south where we live and things like that. Scale and mass, nothing has changed on the does not comply. There's still only 2 styles of homes that are inconsistent with the surrounding neighborhood. The only similar homes are the 2 that Mark II LLC has built nearby on Spacious Skies Drive. And this one is agricultural guidelines. And this one here, what has changed here? There are still the same 2 home designs as submitted in August, and the surrounding neighborhood considerations have been removed by the planning department. So here in the 13th, they have consideration to our neighborhood, and then also it's been removed on the 27th. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate the time. Yeah.
What are we doing? Stop. What are you doing?
I would like to...
Are you signed up?
I am not, but I would ask you to please that...
This time is gone. Okay? All right, just wait until the end of it. Just sit down for a second. No, you're not signed up either.
I didn't know you had to sign up. I haven't been here in quite a few years.
Fine. Have a seat, please. We have an order to follow. Okay? Mike Nakai.
Mike Nakai, 225 Morning Star Court.
Can't hear you.
Mike Nakai. Mike Nakai, 225 Morning Star Court. Just to, while you're bringing that up, to follow up with Doug's comment, you folks have this handout, right, of the staff report? Okay, if you go to page 6, the first bullet on density, it clearly states what the requirement is for cluster developments, and you will see a detailed explanation of what the intent, it actually uses the word intent, of cluster developments is. I'm sure this came from Sally. We've had a number of discussions on this. I do not challenge her interpretation of this whatsoever. I believe that that is what the intent was. However, it is not what the words say. Words matter, laws matter. Okay, so that's all I have on that topic. So I want to preface this with I was a volunteer firefighter in a rural area in Texas, somewhat similar to this, a small town with bordering wildland. So we talked about floods earlier. I'd like a little bit of time to talk about fire. There's been a number of reports and studies done after the Waldo Canyon fire. What is surprising is a fact of what happened is that we did not have a large number of homes lost by wildland to home ignition, but home to home ignition. Okay, so these reports were made for analysis done of many homes in that area, and these spaced homes in Mountain Shadows were 12 to 20 feet apart. Yet there was a number of home-to-home ignitions, actually more than wildland to home ignitions. So this is a picture of a road coincidentally called Majestic. This is the before picture. This is the after picture. Okay. Now this is north. This is normal orientation. North is at the north, and west is on the left. So if you guys remember, the fire came out of Queens Canyon and over into Mountain Shadow. So it came from the left of this picture. What you can see is 8 homes in here that survived the fire. It crossed Flying W Ranch Road, which is a 2-lane with a turn lane road, and ignited homes within the Majestic Drive area. These are patio homes with minimal code spacing. All of this stuff was built under Colorado Springs code, and but look at what happened in here. This entire patio home division was laid waste. Homes on the right survived, homes on the left survived. In the middle, it was laid waste. The reports, again, another report is that these were ignited by embers because the road didn't burn. The embers came across the road, ignited one house, and then they dominoed. And again, this is these are national studies from the federal government. This one is from NIST. Again, the separation in the distance had a big impact on how many homes were lost. 135 homes lost in Majestic out of the 342 lost in all of the 18,000 acres that were burned in Northern Kingdom. This street is Courtney Drive. Before, after. Again, homes along the perimeter where the fire came from the west, a lot bigger spacing. Homes on Majestic laid waste. I believe the report said that the home down this corner started and then they just dominated. These reports are readily available. You can look this up. These pictures, you can look them up yourself. And there's report after report. This is from U.S. Forest Service. What they're talking about here is the home ignition zone, where you're supposed to have a safe zone around your house. So you have this, but what's been done is you overlap them. So you have this space between yourself and the adjacent house, and he counts that same space between his house and yours. So it's kind of used twice. The setback advice for a fire-wise friendly neighborhood in a wildland urban interface is 30 feet of clear space from the foundation to the property line. Okay. All right. That's all of the presentation I have, other than to give you a chance to think about one more thing before you vote on this. Because if you look at this picture and imagine you were the governing body that approved cluster developments in a mountain community and resulted in this. Okay? Thank you.
Mike, got a question. Did you talk to Northeast Telecom and Fire about this?
Nope, I have not.
Why?
I'm actually talking to Colorado Springs Fire Department. I've had conversations with their head of wildland mitigation, and I'm actually trying to get him to come to City Council next week. He's checking with Fire Marshal Lacey, and we're trying to work out those details. I went to Colorado Springs because this was Colorado Springs. The lessons learned are in Colorado Springs. So it's a good question, John, but that's why.
Thanks.
Okay. Anything else?
John Miller, Kings Crown. John Miller, Kings Crown. Okay. Ann LaGreco.
Good evening. Ann LaGreco, 1030 Wintergreen Court. Kind of
piggyback on previously pointed out topics. When I first heard about this proposed development in the 21 homes, I realized that's changed, but part of that development proposal hasn't changed, and that's the cluster on one side of the street. Now, if you're looking at true density of those homes and where they're located, it's not exactly the half an acre per home. When I think of density, I think of how many homes are located in this particular space. You kind of have to forget about that open space because that's not really density of those homes. And the previous speaker pointed that out. The density, if you take away the 2.65 acres of open space, leaves you with 4.42 acres amongst 13 structures, and that gives you about a third of an acre between those 13 structures. And if you want to picture what a third of an acre is for a lot, you can go out to Stone Ridge Village. Those lots, I figured up the vacant lots out there. I figured up the average for all the vacant lots that are currently owned by builders or developers. There's 18 vacant lots in Stone Ridge Village that are owned by builders and developers, and those lots average at just under a third of an acre. So if you want to see density, go out to Stone Ridge Village and see true density of a third of an acre home. They're on top of each other. I think the fire safety hazard is extremely important when you talk about this kind of density. And I hope this community has learned these lessons from the Waldo Canyon fire and the Black Forest fire. And I wasn't living here when the other fire was here, but Hayman fire. I had to evacuate for Waldo Canyon. Fortunately, my home was not affected. My family and my life was not affected. But you talk to all those people that were affected down in Waldo Canyon that suffered. And some of those people that suffered from the Waldo Canyon fire actually moved on to Black Forest and lost their home there too. I don't think we need a repeat in Woodland Park of high density building, and this is even higher density than I think what those photos showed. I don't think the length of the driveway should determine whether or not we want single family homes in our community. If you actually look at the driveway to get to the home and those cluster parts to the back, they probably were going to be at the same length or shorter had it just been a single family residence on those lots. So I mentioned that there's 18 vacant lots owned by developers or builders in Stone Ridge Village. So those are 18 small lots for small homes that supposedly are desirable in the community, is what I was told. I don't know that that's the truth, or there wouldn't be 18 vacant lots. And that's in Stone Ridge Village off of 67. So there's a closer subdivision off of Baldwin called Wilderness. I drove through there today, and I looked to see how many lots were available there. They advertise as half-acre lots, so a little bit larger than what's over at Stone Ridge. And in that community, there is 21 vacant lots that people can build the patio homes, the smaller homes. If they're in such a great demand, we have plenty of smaller size lots available in Woodland Park city limits that people can build on. I am not opposed to the development of that area. I am opposed to the density of the building that's being proposed. I don't think the open space is relevant. You're still clustering homes in one area. I think it would make more sense to make the open space around the homes. Spread the homes out. Spread the open space out. it's my understanding that the property owner owns 26.74 acres. I'm not sure the configuration of where those remaining acreage is located. I don't know what his plans are for that acreage. I don't understand why there has to be a cluster development right there. I don't think it's needed right there. I think there's other options for small homes, for people who want small homes, for people who want to live with their elderly parents. I don't think our community, as it was planned originally by Will Brown, and the way it's been established so far, I don't think they fit together. There was mention of the words innovative and diverse housing. I think that's what we have right now in Paradise Estates. I don't know why you can't extend that concept in Highland Estates. I don't know why that concept can't extend to be innovative and diverse and you don't have to have cluster housing in that area.
Are you getting close?
Yeah, I don't have anything.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Randy Colburn? Pardon? Your time is gone then, okay? Right.
William Brown. I own about 80 acres in Paradise. And I owned all the property that's currently being discussed. And I master planned it and I developed it. And then I got terribly sick and had a stroke. But I'm happy to report tonight that 30 days ago, the doctors gave me a clean bill of health. And so I'm happy to be here. Two things I think are really important. One is the drainage. And the drainage in the roundabout, one of the culverts is 20 feet wide and it's 8.5 feet deep. The other one is 20 feet wide and 6.8 feet deep. The road slopes down to take care of all the water that comes down. And I've known Mike Bramlett and I appreciate all of his work. But I go back 45 years. I've seen the flows that have come off this mountain. I've seen 12 feet of water. I've seen 8 feet of water, 6 feet of water, 10 feet of water. That's the reason I made the road 8 feet wider than you normally have to do, from 24 feet to 32 feet. That's why I put 2 giant inlets further down the road so you can collect all the water. That's why with Bill Alsbach and the previous engineer in this community, we took that pond and raised the bottom of it 4.5 feet and filled it with concrete. And you're talking about digging it out and expanding it. And we did that so that it would flow, all the water would flow out the inlets and go down the street. We also made sure that the pump station that was sitting right there on the edge of that inlet would not ever flood or be destroyed. Also, the home down below, the first one, had 4 feet of water under the old plan before we put the inlet in. We also, the house below it had 3 feet of water in, all because of the seepage from digging that pond deeper. And so you're going to have all those problems. And no one from the staff has ever talked to me about it. No one from JR Engineering asked me why we did all of the improvements. You're just sitting there and you don't have a clue why we built it. You have a plan in a historical floodplain That's why there are no trees. I was part of the plan in 1975 where we planted over 400 trees in that area. The few that are left on the right side, the rest of them were washed away by the storms. The whole thing is a drainage thing. You can put a few culverts and a few inlets, but you can't solve Mother Nature. And and people just dismiss me. But I have 45 years of living in this community, and I've seen the drainage, and I've seen that. And I don't appreciate being talked down to or be ignored by this staff. Thank you.
It's court, or in court environment, quasi-judicial. Judges don't let you applaud in court, so we'll just kind of take it. You have 2 minutes left. Yeah, you do. Why don't you come on, do it.
I don't have any.
Name, rank, serial number.
Yeah, Randy Coburn. Can you hear me? Randy Coburn, 640 Skyline Drive. We bought there in '99 when Skyline Drive was a dirt road, and I can assure you that we never would have, fathomed that this day would come where we were going to have, cluster's a good name, the whole thing doesn't add up. I think what Mr. Perry said, something about it is just, we should all listen very closely about it being the future. And, if we do this, it probably is going to be the future of that neighborhood. And if it's not, why are we going to put a wart right in the middle of it? It makes no sense whatsoever. It just absolutely does not. And, I guess we're the old guard, the McMansion owners that were the past. I'm opposed to it. Thank you.
Thanks. Whoever wrote this next one, I can't read your handwriting, but you live at 631 Majestic Parkway. And I think it's the gal that came first and the other one came second. There's two of you that signed up that live at 631 Majestic Parkway. Eva or Eric or somebody, or I cannot read this. I cannot read. Does anybody here live at 631 Majestic? Nope, they left. Okay. Marlene, and I cannot pronounce the last name. I got the first one.
It's Marlene Hassenfratz, and I live at 241 Thunder Ridge Drive. And I haven't been privy to all of these meetings. I work quite a few hours a week, but I read through this paperwork that was in the back today and came up with a lot of little notes, many of which people have touched on already. So I guess mine might be a summary if there's nobody behind me. But looking at this paperwork, and I'm a physician, but I used to be in real estate before I was a physician, so all the documents that are reviewed and saying that they comply to this coding, it's all code compliance to cluster homes. It's not code compliance to what the intent was to this SR homes on 1 acre lots. The cluster homes are not compatible with current design. We're told that we're being given a favor by going from 21 homes to 13 homes, but in fact we're being given a disservice by going from 9 homes to 13 homes on that lot. We're going to have 40 more car trips per day in that area. There's going to be 32%, if I read this right, 32% green space instead of 40%. 2.5 versus 2.8 acres, and that green space is going to be more visible with more space between homes than it is with green space behind cluster homes. We're told that we're being given a favor, or the people in the cluster homes will be, by adding the land that has a spring on it. But who's going to build a home on a land with a spring on it? You don't do it. The green spaces, and even for any of these people in this room, we can use paths for forest access, and would have to with this plan,
We talked about paths that we're not even going to be able to use. So the variance that you're going to do now, if you would do it, is a slippery slope, because my concern is what comes next. Apartment houses and the other land that's back there. It appears that due to comments that the cluster homes may have been designed due to a change in topography or the slopes. So in order to capitalize on building in that area, they need to squeeze more homes in a smaller space. But as Mr. Brown said, that space isn't even good space to build on if it's where the flood water goes. So you're also talking about a variance from 50-foot right-of-way to 40-foot right-of-way, 25 feet to 12.5 feet minimum frontage. How does that keep or enhance our neighborhood? The longer drives may or may not be true for single homes. Nobody knows that. Everybody's driveway is a different length. And you're talking about having to have shared, wider access to the cluster homes for 4 parking spaces. So how is that different? Single homes on acres have more trees between them. That looks prettier. It's just nicer, and people tend to plant more trees and have it look nice on the property that's theirs. Your cluster homes only have 10 feet between them. How is that nice? There's drainage issues, less vegetation between those houses. Then they're talking about lights. We're not even allowed to have lights around our houses, and because of the animals and all the wildlife there. But you're going to have this area that's going to have a bunch of street lights? Doesn't make sense. And then there's a ridge, talking about a ridge. How big do you think that ridge is that's going to block all these homes? It's not. And our retention pond on Thunder Ridge Drive filled to the top recently. So where is the water that's going from that higher area coming down by our house going into our drainage area, retention pond? And then it was mentioned that there was a house that was sold for $1 million, and that's supposed to be so great to us. But do you people realize that those people bought that home for $1.2 million? So they lost $200,000. And then you talk about $162 per square foot. Our house we bought a year and a half ago or so, it was 231 square feet, $231 per square feet. So how is that an advantage to any of us? So in summary with this, I think that this is going to result in more traffic, lower property values, decreased water pressure, increased drainage issues, less usable green space, not more. And it's in no way an enhancement to this neighborhood, and any development needs to be seriously reconsidered, particularly with all of the evidence that was given today about fire risks, drainage issues, and everything else. And lastly, I'd like to say that it's a travesty that these residents that came here tonight and took their time to come here get limited in the time that they have to speak about all the important points that we have to talk about, yet the people with the money, the banks, the builders, and everybody else have all the time that they wanted.
That's not true, but that's okay. Darlene, your turn. Darlene Frost. Come on. Come on, you gave up your time for him. Come on, talk. You're next. It's past 10 o'clock. What the hell? Okay.
Hello. I appreciate your generosity, but I had one question, and it may have already been answered through a number of people. I am suspicious of the ongoing claim that that the patio homes will sell for the amount that they say they will, because if you in fact can buy a single residence with probably a basement and a second story, and land that's like ours is 5/8 of an acre or half an acre, why on earth would you pay $550,000 to, I think the range was $800,000, for something that's dinky in comparison? I mean, I do some selling of photo products I make and so on, and I had this great idea about selling magnets. I know what I did to try to get rid of them. I dropped the price. And I'm very concerned that the great plan, I mean, I'm not saying that it wouldn't be wonderful, but I don't feel that's a realistic expectation that people will choose to buy something with such small footage, with such small space between them, and on top of that, they are going to be blessed with HOA payments. It does not make sense to me that that's a realistic expectation. That's all.
Thank you.
And thank you again.
It's okay.
You're a patient man. My name is
Jim Knopp. I live at 350 Panther Court. First, may I ask just a quick question? Is this Highlands in Paradise subdivision? Is that what this is called? Is that correct?
Highlands in Paradise preliminary plat.
Subdivision.
Yes, it's a subdivision.
Okay. According to Colorado Revised Statute Title 30, Government County, Section 30-28-401 Legislative Declaration, the General Assembly hereby finds and declares that it is in the public's interest to encourage clustering of residential dwellings on tracts of land that are exempt from subdivision regulation by county government. Pursuant Section 30-28-101, Section 10C, Roman numeral N, thereby providing a means of preserving common open space, of reducing the extension of roads and utilities to serve the residential development, and of allowing landowners to implement smart growth on land that is exempt from subdivision regulations.
Isn't that what we're trying to do here, exempted?
This is, unless I don't understand correctly.
Okay, that's what this is all about.
Well, he's stating code from the state statutes. Woodland Park is a home rule city. We follow the municipal government statutes, so it is the codes that apply to the cluster development that's within the city's zoning regulations.
State doesn't override.
State does not override.
That completes the public comment period. Okay. I did try to get everybody in, and we did it by, what is our time? 10:30 or 11, where we got to extend or something like that? 11. So we got 45 minutes, so we keep going for a while. Seriously. We'll close the public comment. Rebuttal from the applicant is the next thing on the agenda. Does anybody want to get up, whether it be staff or applicant, because it works for either, of anything that you want to talk about, that you want to counter of what we heard from public comment? Now's your time.
As a civil engineer, Mike Bramlett. As a civil engineer, I would take exception to some of the concerns. I understand. I bought my home that looks at the discharge of the pond. I knew what I was buying into when I bought that home. I worked in that development for many years. And I believe that the drainage, as we have designed it, is adequate and meets all the standards. And I have been successfully practicing this since 1981, and knock on wood, I have solved more problems and have not created problems with my designs. I worked with Mr. Brown during the development of Paradise. I was unaware of the 4 feet of concrete. I will research that. But I was also aware of many conversations, and never was our design put into question at that time. Our design today has the same flow coming off the mountains that we always had. And so I feel like we have accommodated that.
Staff have any comments?
Sure. I would like to first address Ms. Good's question about the concern with future developments prior to addressing the drainage issues. And so the city engineer of the time, after the meeting with the Planning Commission, did immediately contact the bank. We also contacted Mr. Brown to express concerns and seek solutions. The city did take action within the areas of our responsibility at that time by clearing culverts, removing sediment from the lower detention pond down by Paradise Circle, and felt that it was addressed pretty well. And I'm looking at Mr. Ball because he was intimately involved with the actions that were taken. So we felt the only thing that is now outstanding is the work that Mr. Brown has promised the city that he is going to take care of in short order. He was going to do that earlier. We've had a recent meeting with Kip Wiley about a week ago, and he has promised to repair the sediment ponds and the silt fence and the causing of that erosion on his property. So we are addressing that. We addressed it in short order. I'd also like to just make a couple of statements. I really appreciate the public's input. The staff is charged with the responsibility to review our zoning regulations and work with a private property owner with their proposal so that it meets our guidelines and our regulations. There is a great deal of interpretation of those regulations, and they are not always black and white. And cluster development is something new in our community. It has not been used. It is an innovative, smart growth approach, but every development is unique. Every development requires a lot of work with the private property owner, with the code, and trying to uphold the integrity of our regulations. And so it is an iterative process, and the draft staff report was written based on the 21 plan and no open space. Having taken my vacation to draft this report in a timely manner to be able to share the staff's concerns with the developer and the property owner, then we were able to come to what I believe was a good compromise with 13 units on the 7 acres with 2.5 acres of open space. It is up to the Planning Commission to decide from the testimony that you've heard this evening, and I hope you deliberate this for the next 20 minutes or so and share your opinions. It is a new proposal in our community, so it is important that you also look at it very carefully and decide where your level of support or opposition lies. Thank you.
At this point, we'll move on to commissioners begin deliberation.
Yeah.
Okay. We'll go around, just, you haven't had an opportunity to question staff. You can do that as we go around, and you better believe it. Otherwise, we'll run out of time. So we'll go around to each of us, and then we can deliberate after that if you'd like.
Yes, this is a question for staff. When was the original master plan approved? The original one?
Prior to the 2005
Correct.
master plan, we would have to ask Mr. Brown.
1975, 85? The original master plan? What's that?
81.
81. Okay, and the first substantial change was in 2005? Is that correct?
That was when it got amended.
But that was the first substantial change when it was amended.
It was, I don't know what the 1981 plan looks like.
Okay.
But it was, I could say that it was based on lots in the R1 zone. It was a different designation. R1 zones did not have a gross density maximum, It had a minimum of a 15,000 square foot lot, so they could propose up to 3 units per acre.
The approval has a limited time on it, is that correct?
The approval of the master plan.
Correct.
They are approved every, or 5 years is what they run, and then there are subsequent extensions or, extensions.
So how many-
This one is good to 2020.
So how many extensions? Is that 3 extensions?
3 extensions.
In each of those extensions, were there any requested changes?
No, there were not.
Okay. All right. That's all I've got for now.
Mr. Hartsfield?
Yes, thank you.
Add on. One of the concerns I have is setback requirements, in particular in relation to garages. And I know that in other subdivisions, we're concerned about cars being parked in front of the garage and not in the garage. And so I think I'd like to have a clarification or adjustment to the site plan to allow for that minimum 20-foot setback in front of the garage, which is not reflected on the plans. I didn't have a dimension drawing, but it doesn't look like it complies with that. So I'd like to put an additional condition on the proposal to have maintained that 20-foot minimum setback, which looks like we were in partial compliance with initially. Just a comment, I guess, on the architectural drawings or elevations. Having done subdivisions in my work history, I know it's not uncommon to flip models right and left and possibly change roof lines on the same floor plan, but change the roof structure so it looks differently. So I would encourage that those modifications might be implemented also. There's change in, brick here or stone here or different placement of finished materials. Well, it's the same floor plan. You can give different roof lines, different appearances, and within the same footprint in the same building. So I would encourage that, not that as a condition, but just a comment and help enhance some of the earlier comments of having too many of the same building. Right. Primary concern I have is the suburban residential zoning density. And we look at 1833-125C1. It says that the maximum number of dwellings for a cluster unit shall not exceed that underlying zoning. So since there are separate subdivisions of property owners within the overall development, which has the 200 limit, I can see having a comprehensive plan or modification to that plan would support increasing the density here, or maybe reducing the density elsewhere, or having trade-offs somewhere else. Since this is a small lot, 7 acres, it would support direct interpretation of this code to have 7 units. We have the master plan, which applies for the 9 units. So as a stretch, going back to the original master plan, we might be able to support the 9-unit density on this parcel. I'm having much difficulty supporting the 13 units? Excuse me, 13 units when we had 7 as our guideline as the base for that property. And since we're coming to a site plan review, preliminary site plan review, this is our opportunity to push on these items. We wait till the final plat, it doesn't make sense. So this is major planning issues need to be addressed on this preliminary plat approval. So I cannot support the 13-unit density on this parcel. I guess there was one other thing. One of the conditions, you had a comment that the engineers to review the street development prior to submittal of the final plat. It seems like that's late in the process. Maybe I'm misquoting it.
I'm sorry, that actually is up above prior to issuance of a zoning development permit. We should strike
What's the second motion there, item 3?
strike that and approval prior to the final plat. That's usually a carry forward, the final plat, because if they do not complete the infrastructure, then it is guaranteed with a subdivision development agreement and a security. So you can strike and approve prior to the final plat.
Okay, that would make more sense in the process.
Yes.
Thank you.
Prior to the ZDP.
Yes. That's all I have. Ma'am.
Thank you.
This is good.
My concern is the water issue, the drainage issue. I would like to see an independent study to see if this has been addressed. We made a determination a year ago and came to a census that we all felt a certain way about any development going on up there, that we don't affect the neighbors downhill. We all have to live together. This is a community. And I feel an independent, since we do not have a city, we have KIP, but I would like to see somebody more specialized write us a report as to the changes that have made, what has been done, so we feel a little bit more comfortable with adding a possibility of 190 more units up there, and make sure that we're not flooding somebody down the street and have their whole house go down the street, or $85,000 in damages. I think it's the responsibility of this whole panel to make sure that all bases are covered.
We appreciate your concern, as we very much are concerned about drainage in our community. On July 23rd, we had a pretty heavy gully washer. This system functioned just fine. The $85,000 problem that you're referring to was something that we were totally unaware of from that gentleman. And when Mr. Sheets, our previous city engineer, went out to look at that site, it wasn't because of the drainage off of, in his assessment, we don't have proof of this, but talking with the owner, who has now since sold that house, but his assessment was that it wasn't caused by the Majestic Parkway conveyance. It was caused from the Evergreen Court problems and the design of the house initially. So it was poorly set below the grade. The water had jumped the curb and flooded his basement based on the way the topography is. The system has been certified by the engineer, hired engineer. Our former city engineer has reviewed all the materials to our current drainage standards. So this issue, we believe, has been addressed and is solved, as evidence of the gully washer. Wasn't quite a 100-year storm when you went out with Bill, but it was close to it, and Majestic Parkway functioned just fine. So I just want to reassure you.
Okay, because I thought somebody in the audience had stated that it was up over the banks again on that detention pond. Close. Oh, Thunder Ridge, okay.
It's going to overflow. Remember that very ground that's coming over the edge.
And that's a different drainage basin than the one, than the one that we are discussing. With the subject at hand, the cluster development is not in the same basin as Marlene's basin.
Okay, so the water does not flow down to her basin?
No, okay. Does not.
This is Carrie.
I think this sounds like a quality project. However, my concern also is about the one residence per 1 acre and how we have gone down to whether we could have 9 residences on 7 acres or down to 1 residence per 1/2 acre. And as one person pointed out, we're down to 1 residence per 1/3 acre. So I'm a little concerned about that shifting, and also, even though the green space will be quite attractive, this will be a private area.
Mr. Brown?
This is just a question or two. I just can't see the dimensions marked clearly on it, but houses, where they front along Spacious Skies and also what's known as Red Hawk Ridge, is that 12.5-foot setback from the street as well? That's not just an internal setback? You know what I'm talking about? Here and here?
You mean the patio homes?
Yes.
Those
The discussion, it
apply.
sounded like you could authorize a 12-foot setback, but I don't see hard to read the dimensions you can mark.
They are at 12 feet, 12 and a half feet,
12.5 feet. All right, well,
at a certain point.
yeah, no, that's...
Not the entire house.
That's what it looked like to me. That's actually even if one were to have a development of this sort with lesser space internally to it, I find it problematic to push it out to the street as well. It's kind of a nice circle, there's a nice open area, now you're moving those houses in close to that area, which doesn't seem to me to be necessary to accomplish the purpose and undesirable. Let me also ask, you referred to the staff recommendation to go ahead with a reduction in the street right-of-way to 40 feet, and the paved street will be just as wide. Why is that a good idea if it's 50 feet everywhere else in the development?
There's quite a bit of wasted space within the right-of-way because now the utility companies do not want to put their utilities in the right-of-way, so they're going to use the 10-foot utility easement. So in effect, what we have is a total of a 70-foot public space that is a clear swath, and we would give up that 7 feet or so on either side of the curb and gutter because now it's not being used for utilities, and just bring the utilities closer to the curb and gutter.
Okay. I live on a street with 60 feet, so I guess it's 80 feet wasted is the theory?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but isn't that area used for walking or bicycling, that kind of thing, for public safety, having a little bit extra space? Because I know in my neighborhood, for instance, the road's not very deep, very wide, but I've got ditches on either side.
Right.
And I wish I had a little bit wider so you had a place to either walk, because if traffic's coming, you have to either get into a 4-foot ditch. I don't think that would be considered wasted space on the road.
So that's a good point, but when you have curb and gutters that carry the drainage, then you don't have to have ditches on either side of the road.
But you'd like to have some space so people can walk.
And within the 24-foot mat, plus 2 feet on either side, you have ample room to be able to walk.
Because it's not on their private property, it's on their right-of-way.
Reduced, but perhaps ample, I guess.
I mean, most of us have SUVs around here, big trucks, and...
You can't drive that on the right-of-way. I'm just teasing.
Okay. All right, several more general comments on it. First, and I guess that's neither here nor there for this discussion, I'm not terribly happy with the structure of this ordinance, 1833-125. The way it's done, it seems to presuppose the desirability of cluster development in most cases, and it purports to restrict the basis for review by the City Council and by the Planning Commission. I think there's room for the City Council Planning Commission to exercise discretion, but the criterion that are put in place and I don't need to review them now, are all structured in a sense that almost any proposal for cluster development is going to hit some of them. I mean, and there could be a PUD option, it could be strengthening those criteria, or it could be adding additional balancing criteria that the Planning Commission and City Council could be used that I believe should be incorporated into that ordinance. But more specific to this particular one, I think in the discussion this evening it brought out a point several people have emphasized as well, that the so-called open space here is private space. So I really question if it fits within the meaning of open space. If it does not, the definition of clustered development refers to specific areas of the parcel to allow the remaining land to be used for open space, recreation, and/or preservation of features and/or structures with environmental, historic, cultural, or other significance. Since this is private space, I kind of doubting the open space. I don't hear anything about recreation. This may not fit the definition at all. In fact, I suggest it doesn't fit the definition of what a cluster development would be. Now, moving on beyond that, the discussion of the master plan, and Ken, I think, emphasized that as well, I think is important here, and the staff recommendation is to even the order of considering these matters: first, approve a cluster development; second, approve a preliminary plat with revisions of the master plan. See, the master plan has to be, is in place to understand how the plats and how the much larger area is going to be developed. I don't see how we do that after the fact, after we put the cluster development in. But more important than that is that, first off, because it has to be changed now, that emphasized the master plan seems to be a highly flexible document that changes as the circumstances arise and the developer's request comes in place. That suggests to me that there's a lot of uncertainty as to how many plots there really will be in this 197-acre parcel as a whole. In my view, the land which has already been subdivided, already been platted, doesn't count. That was put in place with, there's pluses and minuses in every layout of land. Some lots bigger, some lots smaller. If there's sort of unused density, that was part of the package that approved that. You can't sort of keep that in your pocket and always trot it out later and say, I've got some unused density so I can cluster somewhere else. I think that's off the table. The part that's not, the unplatted part, we don't know how it's going to be platted. We don't know how it's going to be used. I believe it's inappropriate to count that. Each of those points and the flexible master plan emphasizes the lack of knowledge, and then bring us back to the ordinance provision 1833-125 on density. It refers to the lot we're talking about, the 7-acre lot in the staff report, but more importantly in the applicant's material as well, indicates that the parcel that's being developed here is that 7-acre parcel. Therefore, it seems to me that the density calculation must, based on the ordinance and the circumstances here, be based solely on the 7 acres, which means seven units of dwelling. If they came in with not 7, but added another 10 acres, 20 acres, 30 acres, with the development laid out, with the entire plat in front of you, then you could do a calculation to see if cluster development is appropriate. It is not appropriate under the ordinance as structured here. And
I'll go over your 5 minutes.
I guess that's some of my thoughts.
Mr. Watts, thank you.
Just one point is that there is an entitlement to this 7 acres for 9 lots already. And, you know, that you must abide by because that was approved.
I understand, and if there were 9 lots laid out, if that were a plat, that's fine, but, all right.
Yep. And just one other comment, the master plan is the guiding document. It shows the layout of the roads. It shows the 175 potential lots in the entire area. So there are a net 15 density to the 190 that can be used somewhere else.
No, I understand. I mean, I don't believe it can be counted those that are already there, and there's no plan including cluster for the remaining portion.
And cluster is a new concept. for this community. It's the first time it's been applied. So I don't disagree that writing code and not having examples to work through the bugs of that code is important. Yep.
Okay. A comment, I guess, and I'm personally sanguine that everything with regard to that we're off the hook for the prohibition of building there unless something was done about the flooding. I think that's been taken care of. So I think we can then proceed that work taken care of. We shouldn't proceed very. The other comment I have is another comment I have is that Teller County in the last year and a half conducted a housing survey. As part of that housing survey, a lot of research was done and a lot of organizations talked to about future trends in housing and demographics within Woodland Park and in Teller County at large. And focusing on Woodland Park, the state demographer was very clear that their research, and it's not dated, it's recent, is that people, the gray wave, of which most of us I see in this room are part of, that's coming, the retirees of the future or of the present are not particularly interested in the very large homes that some of us have committed to. They are a different generation. They are looking for ease of ownership and are looking for small homes or small square footage where they don't have the obligations and the maintenance to tie them down. That is very clearly a trend, and as explained to us, Woodland Park is going to be the recipient of quite a few of those seniors. So in that regard, I don't, in terms of market, I don't think that this particular project is not that we will not be, homes will not be able to be sold even at the prices that they're at. So I just wanted to make clear that that is a trend and that this is compatible with that trend. Our master plan calls for diversity. This satisfies diversity, I think, in our housing. We have very little of that in our communities, which limits the numbers of people that can come to our community. So I think my personal opinion is that a project like this is of the future. They are single-family homes. They're just closer together. They are expensive homes. $500,000 is probably the starting point until you get your refrigerator upgraded and the countertops taken care of and your cabinetry taken care of. You're probably talking about $700,000 to $800,000 for the homes, which I think is entirely compatible with all of the neighborhoods. I do not see the structures being, as I drove around the neighborhood today, I did not see these homes being incompatible with the homes that are existing there, other than size and proximity to one another. Well, that's not necessarily incompatible. Their looks and their price is compatible with the surrounding area. If we, the comps tell us that. So in my view, I think that this is a worthwhile project for Woodland Park. I think it will attract quality people to Woodland Park. And I don't think, as I read in some of the missives that came through, that we're talking about increased crime rates and that sort of thing by the population that's going to going to do it. So I support the project.
I stand between...
Go on.
I'll get it done in 2 minutes. I've had mainly trouble by the way the density is rationalized. I just can't get through it. I've tried. I came with an open mind tonight, but I think there's a little bit of borrowing from Peter to pay Paul. And on that basis, on the density and the way it's justified using all the available lots, I'm opposed to the project.
I guess I'll go last, and I won't take 5 minutes. I'm trying not to. I came in here actually thinking a cluster project would be a good idea. I've seen many of them. I've been in them. The D.C. area is not my favorite place, but I've seen many very, very nice cluster projects in D.C. They'll go into the areas around the Beltway as you go up into Maryland and up that way, and they'll take a piece of land, they'll put the houses close together, doesn't lower the price, not in D.C. area, and they'll put a woodlands or a lake and do that kind of stuff. And I think that's a good idea. I think a lot of people like that. They don't want the upkeep anymore. They don't want a lot of upkeep. They don't want the big piece of land with 3 acres to mow every day, that kind of stuff. Having said that, after listening to all you folks here, I went out and drove through that place, and I have houses I could drool for. I can't afford that. At 75 years old, I'd be stupid to build one. But you people can afford that. And that was a beautiful master plan. It was a gorgeous place. And what I don't want to see happen is we talk about infill lots here in our city. We take here this lot, and it hasn't sold, we want to get that sold. Okay. I don't want this to be an infill subdivision. We made a master plan with these beautiful paved brick streets that we have in there with nice, beautiful homes. And now in the middle of that, we want to create another subdivision of cluster homes. Do I think cluster homes are a good idea? You betcha. And I think there's a place in a time, and it is the future. It's not been done around here, but it's been done in the East, where they really have density problems, okay? But I don't think we need to harm the people that are already here, that have already spent money to have that kind of traditional home that you don't see a lot of anymore. Thank goodness you can afford to build it. Do that. So there are so many lots left in this project. If you want to make a cluster area, you want to add more area for development and walking and hiking, go do it. But get your per acre square foot size up. Make it so that it's not so contrastingly different than what the rest of that subdivision is. It's not even going to have a paved street. That beautiful paved brick that Mr. Brown probably struggled with, how much that stuff cost to put all that in, it should be continued. When you drive through that subdivision, you go back out of that subdivision, you know why you're out of it? Streets are paved, not brick. And I think it's just a beautiful amenity out there. I know it's a bear for the city to plow. I know that kind of stuff. But they're not all broken up, because I remember talking to Mr. Brown when he had those bricks made to make sure they wouldn't break up. Back when his times were better than they are today. And thank goodness he had that vision to do that. So I'm still undecided. I'm to be honest with you. I don't see us doing something that harms somebody else. I don't ever want to see us do that. And after that, I have no idea. Anybody else? Anybody want to address anybody out there? No, well, okay, applicant, you do? Sure. You said you're going to do it anyway, so that's great.
Well, I'd like to make a lot of comments about what's been said, but I think the density is a big issue. But if you look at filing 2, there's probably more lots in filing 2 that are half acre than there are bigger. and probably 4 is that way, which has already been approved. So if you look at it that way, my simple statement is 7 acres will be 14 units. Whether we do cluster or not, I think psychologically, seeing those units all by themselves is an issue. I would say we should consider up to 14 units because it's done everywhere else around here.
At this point in time, we'd say we'd be looking for a motion, and we'd be looking for a second.
And just a reminder, there are 2 motions recommended. Certainly, you can craft your motion whatever way you'd like.
Would you bring us back up to date on the 2 motions?
Yes.
What we're doing now?
Well, the first motion, it's on page 15, is to recommend approval of the Highlands in Paradise site plan review with the 5 conditions. And this Commissioner Hartsfield did suggest that there be a minimum of 20-foot space in front of the garage added.
That's consistent with the existing codes.
And just a comment, our city attorney has oftentimes guided us that there is a motion to approve with a second, and then if you oppose it and you vote no, it would fail with 5 votes. So just to let you know how that would transpire.
Question on a motion. There's also a third motion, and that's to deny.
That's correct.
Okay. I
Yes.
just wanted to clarify that that's
Yes.
also on the table.
That's correct.
Which
So
I'll
if-
make a motion to deny.
Okay.
We have a motion on the table
Made their justification.
and a second. Discussion?
So just a reminder, this is a motion to deny, so an affirmative vote is what you would need to make in order to support the motion to deny. Okay?
Call the question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. May I just confirm that Commissioner Scanlon moved and Commissioner Brown seconded?
Correct.
Thank you. So we'll begin with Ellen Carrick,
Yes.
Vicki Good,
Yes.
Ken Hartsfield,
Yes.
Jerry Penland,
Yes.
Peter Scanlon,
Yes.
John DeVoe,
Yes.
Jeff Watson,
No.
and Lee Brown.
Yes.
Motion passes, Mr. Chairman. Motion
So-
to deny.
Motion
Okay.
to deny will move forward to the city council agenda for next Thursday. So we encourage you and thank you for coming out and making your comments.
A point of order.
Yes.
We've denied that motion. That doesn't mean you can't come back at another point with something else different than that. Or you can hold it from going to, they can withdraw it.
Well, the
going to
applicant, next step is to take it forward to council or make a decision to do something different.
I just want to make sure you got options there. Okay. Anything else for the reports?
I have nothing.
No reports? 6 minutes before we have to dismiss anyway. Yes.
Just as a follow-up to some of the comments we had tonight about fire safety, and I know the Colorado Springs has a hillside overlay, which has more stringent fire requirements. I would propose that staff look into such an action for Woodland Park.
Let's discuss that at a work session.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you, folks, for coming. Thank you for your time. 1 second, yeah. Thank you for your effort to come here and do what you're doing as citizens for our place. I have a motion to adjourn. Second. All those in favor? Aye. We're adjourned. That's Peter. There's his.
You want a gift?
The other one is hers. I got to give that one.